Ileana, the protagonist of a dramatic story, will also participate in the ceremony. But no less fascinating, besides being the future boss's sister. Her brother's words that her role in the ceremony was very important, and that no one but her should bring the balm sank into her heart. Due to her love for her brother, the girl takes her responsibility very seriously because she does not want to disappoint Robert, who trusted her. Before the next day, the main character practices carefully, trying to complete everything without a single mistake. The girl's diligence and beauty amaze her servant, and the subordinate tries to show the girl how excellent she is. Despite all the maid's praise, Ileana continues practicing with full seriousness and asks the maid not to get distracted. Suddenly, due to an awkward movement of the hand, the bowl rolls to the edge of the tray and falls to the floor with a loud sound. Both girls watch in horror as the bowl with many dents continues rolling in the opposite direction from them. The maid starts apologizing and begs the lady to have mercy on her for treating such a valuable item in that manner. Ileana understands the maid's pain, as the girl could easily be fired for this, which would be a great blow to her, so she decides to take all the blame. The main character calmly picks up a dented cup from the floor, and trying to calm her subject, she convinces her that it is not her fault, despite all the girl's words that her mistress had nothing to do with it. Ileana ignores them and only asks to clean the hallway. The heroine decides to personally tell her uncle what happened and convinces the maid that everything will be fine, and that there is no need to worry about it. But standing in front of the door, she has no idea how to explain the situation that occurred. All her thoughts are filled with fear and thoughts about whether her uncle will be very angry when he finds out everything. Ileana, not understanding at all what to do and trying to find the right words. She hears a voice calling her by name. Turning around, she sees her brother already standing beside her, and with a brusque movement of his hand. She hides the dented cup behind her back. Robert, with a smile on his face, asks his sister what she is doing here, to which the heroine tries to find excuses as quickly as possible. Trying to change the subject, Ileana asks if her uncle is very busy, to which she receives an affirmative answer. Seeing that his sister is hiding something, and so carefully does not want to show it Robert. Leaning slightly in the hope of seeing what is behind her, he asks about it. The protagonist, trying to step back so that her brother would not see anything, stumbled and waving her arms, she began to fall. Having time to react, with a quick movement of his hand, the boy managed to grab his sister, preventing her from falling. Suddenly, Ileana realizes that she still could not hide the dented cup from her brother, because out of fear, she didn't even realize that she had taken her hands from behind her back. At first not understanding, but then realizing what exactly his sister was hiding, Robert decided to simply ignore what he saw. To him, his younger daughter was worth more than any relic, and therefore only worried about his sister. The boy lifted her up, to which she screamed in fear. Ileana's brother, realizing that the issue is with her shoes, decides to check this, and he sees that the shoes really turned out to be terribly tight. Seeing the abrasions on his sister's leg, he points out that all this is due to her diligent rehearsals before the ceremony. The protagonist, trying to explain herself somehow to her brother, says that she decided to wear these shoes for the first time. Robert, without even letting the girl finish speaking, reminded her that she was his only sister, and that she would remain so no matter what. Carefully and tenderly placing more comfortable shoes on Ileana's feet, he tried to convince his sister that she did not have to dress according to her age, but quite the opposite. He wanted her to gradually become a confident girl. With a wide smile on his face, he confidently said that everyone would definitely love Ileana and consider her the greatest asset of the castle. The protagonist, very surprised by her brother's words, noticed that she really would not want this. Getting up, the boy suggested postponing the meeting with his uncle and gave him the news that Richard would come. The heroine's brother also clarifies that Richard has taken over the duties of high priest, and he would like to make sure that the preparations for the ceremony are going well. The words about the ceremony reminded the girl of the damaged cup. Thinking about it, Robert suggested that it was still not worth showing the relic to Richard in this form. Because, although he was his friend, he knew how finicky this guy was. Ileana only confirmed her brother's words, because she knew that he was a person who could postpone the ceremony because of this. Saying there was no need to worry, the young man reminded his sister about the wizard who was needed precisely for such cases. Suddenly, with a sharp pull, someone's hand snatches the cup from Robert's hands. Not knowing what to say or how to proceed, Ileana's brother is paralyzed with bewilderment. Behind him stood Richard, who was not at all happy to see the sacred relic in such a terrible state. However, in the name of the performing priest, he decides to ask what happened to the cup, to which he receives no proper explanation from his friend. After the greeting, Ileana takes everything into her hands and tries to explain the current situation. Moreover, she apologizes for what happened. Having remained silent, Richard turns his stern gaze towards the girl, who shows all her remorse. Defending his sister, Robert tells the boy not to intimidate his younger sister, to which he receives an answer from his friend that he intimidates no one. Brother, trying to cheer up the heroine by saying that many people say there are 3 more terrible weapons in the castle. And pointing his finger at his friend, he informs that Richard, with his facial expression, is one of those tools. Seeing the boy's still stern expression, Ileana asks her brother to stop treating him so rudely. But still, the girl herself understands that sometimes Richard can look truly creepy. After thinking for a while, the main character realized that if you look closely, the young man is still very handsome. Seeing that Ileana does not take her eyes off his friend for a long time, the girl's brother tells her about this. Saying that he will not allow the 2 of them to be together, he tightly hugs his sister, showing all his jealousy. The young man points out that although his friend is not a bad guy, setting aside his stern face, Ileana is too young to fall in love with him. Robert tells his friend not to even dream about his little sister, while Ileana herself tries to calm him down. Seeing his sister's concern, her brother gently strokes her head and tells her it was a joke. He says that the reason for the nonsense he said lies in the fact that he is very happy that he has a sister and a wonderful best friend, and also perhaps because he feels left out. Pointing out certain reasons, he asks not to take all his friend's words seriously. Ignoring this situation, Richard hands the cup back to the boy, noting that he is not that frivolous. Robert asks not to worry about the damaged relic, as he will go to Adam, who will fix everything. Suddenly, the boy gets an idea that after Ileana and Richard get married, his friend will be able to become a family member, and he decides to guess. Hearing this, Ileana screams with shame on her face, while Richard still stands next to her with a serious face. Having repeated the question, Robert decides to clarify who exactly his friend will be, to which Richard only sighs deeply. Despite all this, the heroine's brother thought his idea was quite good, and he didn't understand what could be better than this. Even more embarrassed, the heroine was confused by her brother's words. The clear day quickly turned into night, with a dark sky where the stars could be clearly seen. Trying to sleep, Ileana could not shake off thoughts about the next day, because it would be time for the ceremony. Recalling the old days, the girl realized that after the terrible death of her parents, there were almost no incidents. The only thing that happened during this time was that she accidentally dropped her parents' portrait. But her brother, albeit clumsily, still managed to fix the broken frame. With a smile on her face, the girl addresses her deceased parents and tells them that she has an affectionate brother, and that he must become a wonderful leader of the fortress. The heroine's half-asleep state is dispelled by a voice calling her by name. A moment later, a strong male body lifts her from the bed and carries her across the room. Trying to say something, the girl is interrupted by being asked to remain silent, and she realizes that it is Robert's voice. Paralyzed by fear and not understanding anything at all, Ileana only hears her brother's ragged breathing. After carefully placing his sister in the closet, Robert asks her to sit quietly and not to betray herself under any circumstances. He tells her that Richard should come for her and that he is the only one she can trust. Filling the room with light, the moon also illuminated Robert, and Ileana clearly saw his injured body. Even more misunderstandings arose in the girl's head, and she wanted to hear at least some kind of explanation from her brother. Suddenly, grabbing his sister, Robert asked her who she could trust. Even more frightened, she said Richard's name in a trembling voice. Hugging his sister tightly, but tenderly, her brother told her that Richard would be the only one who could protect her. Holding Ileana even closer to him, he just reminded her how much he loved her. Not understanding and not knowing what to do, the protagonist began to worry more and more about her brother. Saying that she wouldn't have to wait long, as it wouldn't take much time. Robert reminded her of his request and carefully closed the cabinet doors. Ileana, confused, trying to understand the reason for Robert's strange behavior. She could find no other reason than the beginning of the war. Seeing the dress hanging nearby, thoughts of the good times she spent with her brother began to appear in the girl's head. She remembered how he asked her to wear this dress for the ceremony, assuring her that it suited her very well. With trembling hands, clutching and burying her face in the dress, Ileana kept thinking about the bloody wounds on her body. A voice calling her brother's name loudly and angrily pulled her out of her thoughts. With rage on his face, one of the knights attacked Robert, trying to apply maximum force to injure him further. The guy, holding the sword tightly in his hands, defended himself from the enemy's blow. And the clash of swords filled the entire room. Hitting one of the knights with his sword, he threw him to the other side of the room. Trying to figure out whose hands these were, Robert sternly asked who had sent them. The group, remembering that they were the knights of this fortress, pointed out that the boy must understand everything by himself. Taking all words as lies, Robert tried to prevent the knights from touching his sister in any way. With the help of sudden movements, he strikes one of the knights hard, preventing him from getting close to the closet. Hearing everything that was happening in the room, Ileana began to worry more and more about her brother. Thinking that she needed to get out and help her brother as quickly as possible, the girl reached for the closet door. Her brother's words about not going out under any circumstances ran through the girl's head. And she stopped. The girl tried to calm down somehow by thinking that her brother was the direct heir to the family, and that there was no one stronger than him. At that moment, standing with great difficulty breathing, Robert clutched his shoulder wound to somehow stifle the pain and stop the bleeding. Standing in the room, in the middle of which lay the bloody body of one of the knights. The young man tried to rest at least a little to find new strength for the attack. Seeing that Robert was getting tougher, one of the knights told him that the guy must stop holding the lands in his hands. Robert raised his head and said that the wind would remember the vile faces of the knights, and that all the winds of the castle would curse them. Hearing this, flames of anger and indignation flashed in the knight's eyes. Ileana shuddered in horror as she saw the bloody sword pierce the closet door. Through the gap left by the sword, the girl heard a loud crash and a conversation that a group of people were trying to find out where she was. One of the knights, saying that the girl could not be found, suggested that Robert send his sister and the wizard out before they arrived. Not wanting to hear anything, his commander issued a decree for the remaining group to search the remaining places, and, upon finding Ileana and the wizard, kill them. Suddenly, the protagonist realized that the drops of blood splashing on her dress definitely belonged to her brother. Recalling the image of her brother, the girl, trying not to believe what happened, thought that most likely she was mistaken, because this simply could not happen. The stunned Ileana, staring into space, was called by her uncle's voice, calling the girl by her name. After asking if the heroine was here, he asked the girl to come out of the closet as soon as possible. Surprised that Robert had saved her. Again, thoughts about her brother's previous words about Richard appeared in the girl's head. Who could be the only one to protect her? Suddenly, the protagonist realized that her brother hadn't said anything about her uncle. Smiling, the uncle tried to convince Ileana that everything was fine now and that she could trust him. What crossed the girl's mind was that everyone said that, for a long time, the god of winds has been taking care of the children of his family. And the gentle care of the wind remains even after they grow up, protecting them from dangers. Thinking about this, the girl could not understand why he did not protect her brother. Slowly opening the closet doors, the uncle called the heroine by name again. Not knowing what to do anymore, Ileana only wished that if the wind could not protect them, then those who hurt Robert would be accompanied only by a thorny wind for the rest of their lives. Turning sharply, the heroine's uncle saw one of his knights being killed, and his body falling to the ground. In the center of the room, illuminated by the moon, stood Richard, holding a sword from which drops of blood fell to the floor. With a stern face, turning to Joseph, the deputy head of the fortress, he asked to stop for his own good. Standing, completely bewildered, the girl's uncle tries to ask the boy what he is doing here, to which he receives a response of complete ignorance. Seeing Richard heading towards the girl's hiding place, he loudly yells at the young man to stop. Despite the deputy head of the fortress's violent reaction, the guy moves closer and closer to the closet. Richard sits down a little and sees his friend's injured body, whose clothes are covered in blood. Even more enraged, Ileana's uncle yells at the guy, asking what he is doing now. 129. After remaining silent for a while, the young man spoke of his intention to fulfill his duty, protecting everything related to this family. Getting up and turning to the man, he advised him not to bother him. Opening the closet doors, Richard announced that he had come for his fiancée, and that he was going to pick her up. The girl sitting in the closet cast her depressed gaze downwards. With a furious face, Ileana's uncle tried to find out which fiancé the boy was talking about, since the girl was only 14 years old. Although he agreed that the girl was only 14, the young man made it clear that it was only a matter of time. Richard reached out and grabbed the heroine's palm and pulled her towards him, emerging from the dark hiding place. And looking around, Ileana saw the body of her brother, bleeding, leaning against the closet door. Despite Richard's unperturbed gaze, in his thoughts he understood that the girl was suffering great pain, because it was the last time she would see her beloved brother, but she still needed to capture Robert's end. Ileana looked horrified at her murdered brother and could not utter a word. With a furious expression, Ileana's uncle, who said he would not allow the marriage, reminded him that no stranger has the right to interfere in the internal affairs of the fortress. Pointing at Richard, the man ordered the knights to deal with him immediately. Seeing the attacking enemies, the young man asked the heroine to wait a bit, and drew his sword from its sheath. With swift movements, he inflicted fatal wounds on several knights. The confused deputy head was surprised by the guy's skills because he killed several people in the blink of an eye. And a closing eye. Richard put the sword back and repeated that he did not claim ownership of the fortress. The girl's uncle shuddered at the boy's words, which made it clear that if they want to kill the castle owner, they must be prepared for a war to break out. Seeing the girl's condition, he pulled her towards him and took her in his arms. Heading towards the exit, Richard passed through the remaining knights, who no longer tried to resist him. Trembling with rage, the man could not understand how he dared to do this. Carrying the main character in his arms, Richard left the castle. A girl ran out to meet him and anxiously asked where Robert was, and if everything was fine with him. Ignoring the question, the boy told her that they needed to return to the castle. The surprised girl asked where Robert was, suggesting that he managed to escape alone. After a pause, the guy, very reluctantly, makes a decision and says that Robert is dead. Not believing Richard's words, she decides that she will bring him herself if he does not want to follow him. The boy stopped Bella with the words that a situation where a wizard from one castle tries to penetrate another would look too strange, and could lead to war. The enraged girl shouted that she did not care at all if the war started, because she was ready to start a massacre and finish off the deputy head of the fortress and his henchmen. Trying to calm the girl, Richard told her that Robert wanted this land. Unable to hold back tears, Bella covered her face with her hands and began to sob bitterly. Seeing the girl's reaction, Richard decides to return to the castle. At that moment, Ileana wakes up and looks up, barely alive. She remembers her brother's words that the only one who could protect the girl would be Richard. Lifting her head, the girl sees the face of the young man holding her and realizes that Robert's words were true. A clear image appears in the heroine's head of how the next day should have been if it weren't for the whole situation. In her imagination, the girl scolds her brother for disappearing so suddenly. And not being able to find him, she asks if he forgot what day it is. With a smile on his face, the young man undoubtedly denies his sister's assumption, saying that today is the day of the title ceremony. With a smile, he suggested that his sister really liked dressing up like an adult lady. And in his opinion, the girl was waiting for the ceremony just to show herself in all her glory. Embarrassed, Ileana shouted that everything was not at all what her brother thought, and she was trying to find at least some excuse. But Robert insisted on his own, telling the girl not to pretend, because everything was clear on her face, clarifying the reason the heroine wanted to invent and not receiving a proper answer. The brother is still touched by his sister. Seeing the look of dissatisfaction on his sister's face, he asks her not to be offended. The girl embarrasses her brother by telling him that she sincerely congratulates him. After saying that she won't say anything more, she leaves saying she will see her brother a little later at the ceremony. Having stopped the heroine, Robert hugs her with strong embraces. With tenderness in his words, he says that he loves her more than anything in the world. Realizing that this was only part of her imagination, the girl thinks through tears that at that moment she replied to her brother that she loves him very much too. Carrying Ileana in his arms, Richard and tear-stained Bella move further and further away from the evil-filled castle. Many people say that God has two viceroys among the people, the king and the high priest. The position of the high priest is passed down in the family of the saints, but the king had to be found with the help of human wisdom. Looking at the candidates with his divine nonsense, the high priest noticed that one of the castle owners nominated a truly outstanding person to take the place of ruler. The king, understanding that he was God's regent, only brought benefits to his subjects. Despite the state thriving and everyone living in abundance, people, whose pockets were already filled to the brim, began to want more and began to give up everything they had for selfish purposes. Moreover, people have lost faith in God by selling and acquiring power, receiving money through fraud. People have long lost the desire to seek a king sent by God. Now the castle owners began to choose a king who met their expectations. In the fortress where Richard was the castle head, rumors spread that the head was behaving strangely for no reason. In the middle of the night, he left the castle with the wizard and returned with a girl. One of the knights even suggested that this girl was Richard's daughter, whom he had been hiding all this time. And although others replied to him that their master was only 18 years old, and that there could not even be talk of any daughter, he continued to insist on his opinion. Another nearby knight suggested that the girl was an illegitimate child of the previous chapter. After repeating in his head his words, which sounded like condemnation, the boy simply laughed and said that this could not happen because the members of this family are very disciplined, and they follow all the rules, confirming his comrade's words by the fact that they were indeed dedicated to work. One of the knights noticed a familiar guy walking towards them. Seeing the expression on the face of the knight approaching them, he asked about it. But he received a rather unclear answer. Once again hearing the same question, the young man who came asked again about the girl his master had brought. Having started to speak, the boys interrupted him by assuming that the boss had killed the girl, to which he denied. The three were in complete shock from the words they heard, which said that the fortress owner installed Ileana next to him. Looking at each other, the boys wondered if only the castle owner could live in that bedroom. Richard stopped near the bedroom door and knocked softly, letting the girl know that he wanted to enter the room. Opening the door, the boy saw Robert standing, his hand clutching the curtain. Looking at the sky, Richard turned to greet his friend. Indignant, he wondered if his friend had really decided to let him die while he stood there with a shocked face. Scratching his head, Robert reported that although it wasn't that easy to carry him, this time he really went to another world. After asking his friend if he really liked his sister that much, he moved a little closer to his friend. Answering his question, Richard made it clear that his concern for Ileana was solely because the girl was his best friend's main treasure. Smiling, Robert placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and said that he barely survived. And crawled here only thanks to his help. Asking him if his friend was glad to have survived, the boy asked him to thank him for it. With a smile on his face, Richard said the word thank you in a calm voice. Robert's image dissolved, and the boy turned his gaze to Ileana sitting on the bed. Seeing Richard, the heroine turned her gaze towards him. Saying that the girl had finally woken up, the young man moved a little closer to the bed. Noticing that this might be a bit harsh, Richard decided to clarify a few points immediately. And he informed the girl that they were in his castle. Having exhaled, he will clarify to the girl that for now she will be here as his fiancée. Surprised, the heroine repeated the boy's words, which meant that this would last for a certain period of time. Richard explained his words by saying that he would soon ask His Majesty for permission to marry. And Ileana would become the fortress owner. At the same time, he clarified that permission also requires the cooperation of her family's castle. But there will be no problems with this, as they have no reason to refuse. Saying that after this, as part of his family, the girl would be completely under his protection. Richard abruptly fell silent. Addressing Ileana, he told her that to achieve all this, her consent was necessary. Sitting completely bewildered, the girl asked the boy about her consent. And looking down, she remained silent. Richard explained to the girl that he did not have the strength to come up with a better plan, but that if she wanted to refuse, he would try to find another option. After asking Ileana to think carefully about his proposal, he told her that if any doubts arose, she could come to his office at any time. Paying attention to the girl's clothes, he suggested that this problem be solved first. Looking at the sleeves of the shirt hanging from her arms, he said he didn't care what she wore. And even clothes that servants once wore would suffice. The girl was very surprised after Richard interrupted her and told her that there were no servants in this castle. The young man told her that the first rule of his castle is that everyone must act independently. And independently, but since this is a special situation, after the girl has rested, Bella will help her. Looking down, Ileana asked why they were so kind to her, clutching the blanket in her hand. She said she heard that receiving help from the castle head's wizard was a great honor. And the fact that they trusted her surprised her. Interrupting the girl with his words that Robert would have done the same further surprises the heroine. Richard clarified that if the same situation that happened to his brother happened to him, his friend would also protect what he wanted to protect. At that moment, Ileana realized that between her brother and Richard, there was an absolute trust that nothing could destroy. Getting up from the bed, she told the young man that her brother's last words were that the only person she could trust was Richard. Moving a little closer, she said that this is why there could only be one answer to Richard's proposal. Realizing that the girl had accepted his proposal, the boy looked at her surprised. Thanking the girl for such a quick response, he bowed and asked her to take care of him. To which Ileana did the same in response. The girl looked at the young man surprised after his words, that until she was an adult, he would provide her with total protection. Seeing the surprise on the heroine's face, Richard explained that this was just a fictitious marriage. He explained to the girl that if she meets a person she wants to be with, he will do everything possible for her to leave her family without consequences. The heroine wondered in her head, repeating the words the boy said about the person she would like to be with. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door suddenly opening. Standing in complete bewilderment, Ileana and Richard looked with surprise at the girl who, upon entering the room, immediately noticed that both were already standing. Changing her facial expression to a sterner one, the boy reminded Bella that he asked her to make sure to knock before entering. In response, Bella confirmed with a serious face that everything was so. Seeing Ileana, joy shone on the girl's face and she asked if she was all right. She explained her question by saying that the local air can be hostile to strangers. Ileana replied that she immediately got used to it, which the girl agreed with her. Since Robert also immediately fell in love with the local air. Trying to find something behind her back, Bella said she had prepared a gift for the girl. Showing a sloppy sweater with many protruding threads, She said she made it with her own hands, hoping that the girl would like it. The wizard's friendly face filled with anger after Richard tore the seam by pulling the sleeve of his jacket. After yelling at the boy for ruining all her efforts, Bella heard Richard say that he no longer wanted her clothes to be mocked in that way. Seeing their fight, Ileana talks about wearing a sweater. Delighted, Bella asks if the girl would do this for her, to which Ileana, agreeing, replies that she is a little cold. With a grin from ear to ear, Bella sends the heroine to change clothes as quickly as possible. Bella's face fills with horror after seeing her creation on the girl. Despite the sloppy look, the main character still thanks the wizard and tells her that she feels better now. Still looking confusedly at how the clothes fit the girl, Bella asks how Richard allowed such a small girl to be abused like this. To which he tells her that now the girl herself knows that this cannot be called effort. After apologizing to the boy, he interrupts her by telling her that she should apologize to the main character. And admitting her guilt, the girl apologizes to Ileana. Having asked to wait a bit, Bella confidently says that she will definitely find something better. Richard told Ileana that if she needed anything, she could speak at any time. And Bella, standing next to him, confirmed his words, indicating that she would get everything for her. Ileana's eyes lit up after hearing what she heard, and she promised that she would do exactly as they asked. After making sure the heroine went to rest, Richard and Bella left the room. Carefully closing the door of the room, the wizard heard a request from the boy to find out more about Adam. Having learned a familiar name, the girl checks with the head of the fortress that they are talking about a wizard from Ileana's family castle, and receives a positive answer. Reminding him that it was the wizard who approached them asking for help, she noted that she could not find him on the castle grounds. But because the knights were also looking for Adam, there is a possibility that he survived. Learning that Bella would try to find out something about him, Richard asked to report about it when Ileana was not with him. After asking the reason for this decree, the girl hears from Richard the words that Ileana herself should have questions about it. And this will be her first task. In the office, completely illuminated by the moonlight, Richard sat at his desk. Recalling the moment when Bella continued to dissuade him, alleging that the girl was only 14 years old, and that Robert would have acted differently in his place. After thinking alone for a while, the boy realized that his friend would immediately tell his sister the whole truth. Looking at the photograph on the table, old memories returned to Richard. Here he is, very small, standing in the rain near two graves. In a trembling voice, he begs his parents not to leave and not to leave him alone. Continuing to immerse himself in his thoughts, the boy realizes that he and Bella will not be able to do it forever. All the boy's thoughts were interrupted after hearing Ileana crying for someone. At a dizzying speed, Richard ran out of the bedroom and headed to the girl's room. Running up, he saw a girl sitting who was almost choking on tears. The boy realized that the heroine had realized it, and at that moment, the whole world seemed to her like a huge dark closet. The girl felt in a place filled with horror and despair, in which she could do nothing. Recalling how he pulled the girl out of her hiding place last time, the boy extended his hand. Taking his hand, Ileana put it on her face. Looking at the girl in surprise, the boy stood there, not knowing at all how to act in such a situation. Richard was even more surprised when Ileana pressed against his chest and clutched the fabric of his vest with trembling hands. Having hugged the heroine, Richard realized that perhaps being inside this dark place, the girl was simply waiting for someone to rescue her from there. By morning, sitting on the bed, the boy was again immersed in his thoughts. The situation from yesterday that happened at night was clearly shown in his head. Again and again, Ileana repeated Richard's name, ignoring all the boy's words that he was here. Hugging the girl tighter, the young man could not understand why Robert left this poor creature to him. And left. By morning, Richard, while near the door, knocked on the door. And he received the girl's answer, asking him to come in. Entering the room, he saw Ileana standing in the middle of the room in a beautiful outfit. After the greeting, the girl thanked him for the clothes, saying she liked them very much. Surprised by the girl's beauty, the boy could not utter a single word for a moment. Richard handed the girl the boots he managed to find in the castle, thinking that she might need other shoes. He was glad that Ileana was satisfied and thanked him. Thinking about how the girl's condition had changed, Richard smiled. Looking out the window, Ileana asked permission if she could take a walk around the castle. The young man agreed and asked the heroine if she rested enough in her room. When the girl turned around, for a moment Richard thought his friend was standing in front of him. Looking at the head, the girl said she would like to walk on her feet. Looking from behind the door, Ileana made sure that, unlike her family's castle, there were no servants here. Thinking about who was doing the cleaning, the girl imagined the image of Richard cleaning. Clarifying the idea from her head, she thought this could not be true because the head must be very busy. Reaching the end of the corridor and thinking which direction to take, the heroine turned right. In the girl's head, she recalled her brother's words that if you don't know where to go, you don't need to stand still, but it's better to choose one of the sides. Even then, she wondered about the situation where there would be nothing on the chosen side. But her brother reminded her that she could always return to the beginning of the path. With a smile on his face, he convinced her that all the winds of this world watch over the children of her family, and dispelled her worries. Having found another turn, the heroine again decided to go right. Climbing the stairs, Ileana got closer and closer to the light. The stairs led the girl to the roof, and she saw the most beautiful view from above. Feeling a cool breeze running over her body, the heroine realized that it was the wind that had brought her here. With an expression of shame on her face, she thanked him out loud. Suddenly, a voice from behind loudly asked who was here. Turning around, Ileana saw a pink-haired boy who demanded that the girl introduce herself. The young man fell silent after the girl turned to him. Someone's hand grabbed his shoulder, and Ileana saw in front of her two boys with exactly the same appearance. Both boys were surprised where a head could drag such a beautiful girl. And it was incomprehensible to the mind that she fell into the hands of a cold-blooded beast. After carefully examining the two boys, the girl suggested in her thoughts that they were twins. One of the brothers said that he belonged to the cavalry order of this fortress, and that his name was William. With a smile on his face, his brother introduced himself as Charles. Surprised that the boys were knights of this fortress, she looked at them with delight. Bowing, Ileana greeted and introduced herself to the brothers. With a smile on her face, she said she was very happy to meet them. Looking at the girl, William and Charles could only touch each other. Hearing the brothers' proposal that if the head touched at least one finger, the girl could tell them, she refused, saying that everything was fine. Suddenly, Charles was surprised by the rapid spread of rumors about the girl, which seemed to have already reached the elders. Turning around, the girl saw the elders who were already near the fortress entrance. Recalling that in her family's castle, the elders and the fortress head met to make important decisions, she realized that the meeting was probably somehow related to her. The brothers suggested that the topic for which they convened the meeting was of great importance, since the elders brought their daughters with them, to which Ileana asked for explanations. Richard and Charles spoke about the characters of the elders' daughters, who seem even colder and tougher than those of the girls' parents themselves. Both boys explained that if these girls start talking, not even the boss himself will be able to control them. And so, Ileana and Richard stand in front of these very cold-blooded girls and their parents. One of the presidents decided not to believe the rumors until he saw everything with his own eyes. But when he saw the girl standing in front of him, he realized that the rumors were true. Richard said they were waiting for the elders, because it seemed to him that they should definitely arrive at that moment. Starting to scold them for not telling them anything and not taking their opinions into account. The presidents took this as disdain for the elders. Listening to all the discontent, the boy silently looked at Ileana. Before entering the room, the girl told him not to worry, as it was not the first time she had participated in the elders' council. Ileana turned to the door and offered to enter. He immediately remembered Robert's words that, despite her age, his sister was quite calm. And he was proud of her. Taking care of the walking girl, he was surprised by her confidence. Richard only smiled after personally seeing his friend's words come true. All his thoughts were dissipated by the angry cry of one of the elders. Demanding to say something, his face filled with anger and rage. Looking at the girl and seeing her nod, Richard decided to explain the whole situation to the elders. Confidently in his words, he announced the death of the heir to the castle, which belonged to the girl's family. Explaining that for this reason the ceremony was postponed, Richard considered the preparations for the ceremony to be poor, since there was no heir to receive the title. Showing sympathy, one of the presidents put forward his assumption, pointing out that the other heiress, confirming the old man's assumption that this happened unexpectedly and did not report what happened. Richard apologized. Finally, all the elders understood the girl's circumstances and the reason why she was here. One of the girls, without letting her father finish, asked him not to strain himself too much regarding the remaining objections. After asking permission, she demanded a proper explanation from the castle head about what happened. Richard said that further comments would be unnecessary and did not explain anything. Approaching Ileana, who was bewildered, and looking closely at her, a group of girls were left with a dissatisfied look. Looking at the daughters of the presidents, Richard was ready to listen to all their objections. Grabbing Ileana by the shoulders, one of the girls complained about how it was possible to put such terrible clothes on her. Upon hearing this, the heroine was completely bewildered. Other girls also accused Richard of a lack of taste and could not understand how a pretty face could be ruined. With pity on their faces, they sympathized with the girl because she was in an unfamiliar place and in such a cold climate. She probably wore shoes without socks, so all her toes were probably frozen. The girl gently took the heroine by the face, and amazed by her sweet face, she offered to renounce her head and become her fiancé. Trying to convince Ileana, she told her that she has a lot of money, as she manages several large companies and, if the heroine wants, the girl can teach her how to run a business. At that moment, the presidents were talking about their daughters, whose expectations about the lack of decent clothes in the fortress were justified. Ileana decided to look at Richard and saw how the president's daughters were telling the boss that upon arrival, they wanted to grab him by the neck. Despite the boy's request to calm down, the girls continued to scold him. The fight stopped in an instant when everyone heard Ileana's laughter. The girl laughed, thinking that if her brother saw this scene, he would definitely laugh. Richard was pleasantly surprised after Ileana said that although she was worried. Fortunately, all members of the meeting turned out to be wonderful people. Ileana asked him if there was any information about her family's castle. The boy said that besides this information, the ceremony was postponed due to lack of preparation. There was no news. Then the heroine thought about the decision her uncle had not yet made. Having confirmed, the leader suggested that perhaps he had prepared carefully, welding several scenarios. The girl lowered her head and told how she heard her brother's question directed at the people who attacked them about whom they were loyal to. Richard spoke of the possibility that the knights did not belong to the castle, since the boss himself could not fail to recognize his subordinates. The girl suggested that her uncle was attracting external forces, and if she and her brother had left, then, surely, the power of the wind would turn towards the deputy head of the castle. In the boy's thoughts, the understanding arose that the power of the wind is transmitted along the direct line of the family, and even among direct descendants. This ability selects only one. The person in whose body it appeared becomes the head of the castle and receives all honors, and at the same time responsibilities. Because Ileana left the land of winds, the person most likely to have wind energy would be the fortress's deputy head. The heroine did not understand how someone like her uncle, who killed her brother, could gain power. The girl asked if there were other bodies, and received the young man's answer that no one was injured. Richard warned that it is too early to relax, because those who know the truth will not remain alone. Ileana was very disappointed because she could not help in any way. Knowing that she could make things worse and put others in danger, this would be the best decision for her. Taking a step forward, Ileana noticed that everything was turning out strange. Since to unleash her hands, she would need Richard's family name. By changing her surname, the girl will no longer have the freedom to make decisions, and such a change will probably force her uncle to address her differently. Stopping, the boy asked the heroine if she was really plotting something. Turning to the boy, she agreed with his assumption. With a smile on her face, Ileana said that if it weren't for this, she wouldn't have a reason to be here now. Drying her face with a towel, the heroine walked down the deserted corridor she was already used to. Thinking that she had finally settled in a new place, the girl was happy. A sudden shout asking her to stop immediately stopped Ileana. Standing at the door, she heard the words that if Richard did not accept the condition, the girl would refuse to be his wizard. Recognizing Bella's voice, Ileana continued listening to the quarrel, based on the fact that the castle head did not want to let the wizard go kill everyone. Lifting her hand to the doorknob to open it, she stopped before the indignant girl's words about information related to her family's lock. Ileana was surprised by Bella's question about how Richard could still consider himself Robert's friend after this. By convincing the wizard that even if he kills everyone, neither the temple nor the King of Wisdom will stand idly by. Richard only received mockery from her. With rage in her eyes, Bella shouted that she would not be afraid of them doing anything to her. Standing at the entrance, Ileana heard a shout from the boy, who angrily asked the girl how she was trying to change at least something with her shouting. The wizard's discontent over the fact that they dared to announce Robert's death. Saying that he took his own life, he left the girl lost. Continuing to ask about the consequences of this statement, she asked Richard if he really cared about his friend that much. Not hearing an answer and realizing that the conversation was useless, Bella turned to leave the room. At the last moment, Richard explained to her that if he let her go so easily, out of the three, he would be the only one left alive in this world. Gritting her teeth, the girl fell silent and left the room. Upon leaving the room, she saw Ileana standing outside the door the whole time. Bella looked at the heroine in surprise, who was looking at the floor with a cold gaze. Clutching each other tightly, both girls could not hold back their tears. Richard explained to the main character that Bella had only just realized that Robert was dead. Apologizing for the shamelessness of her wizard, he said that this girl did not know how to suppress her emotions. Since Ileana was very happy to help Bella, she didn't need words of gratitude. She always considered people who cannot hide their feelings the opposite to be very kind. The words she said made Richard smile. Sitting on the bed next to the girl, he remembered that Robert had said the same thing, but in a ruder way. So her brother thought it was cute, because at first glance one could understand what was hidden in her little head. Seeing Bella's reaction, he noticed that she was now embarrassed by this, but the girl only denied it, saying that he was really pissing her off. Richard, sitting with them, listened to all this with a calm expression on his face. Recalling the expression on the wizard's face at that moment, the head wanted to assume that he had very strong feelings for Robert that were probably mutual. Ileana managed to catch his thought before he had time to finish. At the same time, she asked Richard if he was going to let Mrs. Bella leave, to which she was asked if she herself would be against it. Ileana agreed because if the wizard or the leader resisted Joseph, they could be in danger. Confirming the girl's words, Richard added the possibility that in such a situation the King of Wisdom might also intervene. Or the High Priest. Agreed, the heroine got out of bed and said that with her everything would be different. If she, who has the blood of her family, defies her uncle, then it will not turn into a war between the two fortresses. Ileana felt that the one who should start the fight should be her. Richard tried to convince the girl by telling her that Robert would not want his sister to fight, so he or Bella should make Joseph pay. Disagreeing with these words, Ileana said that she wanted this herself. Her uncle, to whom she was attached since childhood, killed her brother for power and the leadership position, so even though Robert wished her only happiness, she will not cloud her soul with falsehood. That's why she turns to Richard to give her his surname. Reaching out, Ileana, with a glint in her eyes, asks him to take her boyfriend as a wife, and receives his consent. Having said that, if his wife is someone who desires truth and suffering, he tenderly kisses the heroine's hand. Richard looked the girl in the eyes and seriously announced his intentions to do everything possible to achieve the desired result. The entire fortress heard the cry of one of the elders, indignant that the boss, along with the young mistress, would leave for the lands of wisdom the next day. Confirming what was said, Richard explained that they were going to get permission for the wedding and would take an oath in the temple. Hearing these words, the elders set about praying to Ileana so that she could connect her life with such an old man. And pathetic. At the same time, Richard received a reprimand from one of them for not giving a single outfit to the one who was going to marry. After hearing all the condemnations, the castle head began to think. When all the presidents saw the boy's reaction, they decided to go pray for him on behalf of the young woman and ask him not to leave someone like him. The elders threatened Richard that if the girl left him, their daughters would take their places. And they would not care about their complaints, that this would no longer be a council of elders. They really hoped that in the future he would take care of the young mistress and warned the boy that they would watch him. And they would not let him forget it. Richard stood there and did not know what to say to all these warnings and threats. Ileana, walking down the corridor, was called by a voice calling her name. Turning around, she saw Robert coming out of the elder's office. Asking him if they scolded him a lot, Ileana heard in response that he took it as nonsense. Richard noticed how late it was, and it was time to quickly go to the rooms. The next day promises to be quite difficult, so the boy advised me to sleep well at night. Having agreed, the embarrassed girl asked him if she could ask him for something. Dressed in a beautiful bright blue dress and matching bows adorning her short hair, Ileana said she was ready. Looking at the door leading to Richard's room, she thought that the castle head had probably also finished changing clothes. Ileana thought it was better not to use that door and knocked on the door of the castle head's office. At that moment, Richard, already ready, came out and greeted the girl. Seeing a young man with braided hair, he fell silent and could not take his eyes off him. The silence was broken when Richard called Ileana again. He agreed with the girl's comment about her updo. Richard was ready to return everything if the heroine did not like her hairstyle. But she, on the contrary, stopped him by telling him that he looked very handsome. Not expecting her to tell the truth, Ileana felt embarrassed by his words. Having invited the heroine to the office, Richard heard from her a question about where Bella is now. He pointed out that it would be strange if this girl failed to fall asleep. Calling Ileana, he asked her to come closer to the chair with the mirror in front of her. Hearing the question, Ileana could not understand why it was necessary. Richard began to carefully comb the girl's hair, who at that moment was thinking about the mess she seemed to have on her head. The heroine pointed out that she never thought about how difficult it is to care for short hair. That said, everything is fine and she will quickly get used to it, the boy remembered last night. Confident that she wanted to get rid of the length due to the difficulty of combing, the heroine sat down in front of him. Cutting her hair herself turned out to be very difficult, so she turned to Richard. After thinking for a while, he agreed to her request. Ileana felt at home while someone else was styling her hair like this. Since childhood, her mother and father combed her hair, and when they were busy, the castle servants helped her. At the same time, her brother often combed her hair, squeezing his palms. Ileana began to think that now there was no one by her side, and now no one would ever do this again. But when she looked up, she saw Richard carefully combing her hair. He asked her if anything bothered her. With a slight smile on her face, Ileana, saying that nothing bothered her, spoke about how for a moment she felt like she had returned home. Richard also decided to talk about how he felt in Robert's role. After thinking about it, the heroine chuckled because her brother had never combed her hair so carefully. Richard felt that if Robert had received the news that it was he who had cut his sister's hair, his friend surely would not have been able to contain his anger. To the girl's denial because she knew how much her brother loved his friend, the director said that her brother always boasted most about his sister. Ileana could not argue with that and remembered how embarrassed she felt at those times. The boy said that when he was next to Robert, she always smiled, which froze Ileana. After the heroine asked him if he was smiling, Richard agreed, and immediately remembered his brother's words. One day, Robert looked at his sister and commented on how radiant her smile was. He believed that with her beautiful smile, she made the people who looked at her happy. After uttering the words, Richard began to smile, and a drop of shame tinted his cheeks slightly pink. Hearing everything her brother said about her back then, the embarrassed Ileana's face turned red. Covering it with her hands, out of shame she wanted to hide somewhere. Trying to dispel the heroine's worries, he also said that her brother was not only talking about this. And he offered to listen. Refusing to listen, Ileana asked him to tell her a little later. To this request, he told her that she could tell him everything at any time, as soon as she asked. After Richard completely combed the heroine's hair, she thanked him. Ileana thought that now no one would comb her hair because it was short, but now. Thinking about it, she just smiled. The heroine was very happy that Richard was so kind to her. After the chapter said that everything was ready, Ileana looked in the mirror. Seeing the braided hairstyle, the girl was amazed at how beautiful she looked. Embarrassed, she clarified to Richard that she meant how wonderful her hair looked. Not her in general. Looking at the heroine, Richard simply smiled at her words. Suddenly, the room door was opened by a breathless Bella, and apologizing loudly. She clarified if she was late. Having said that the girl was late, Richard added that it was for their mutual relief. And Ileana echoed his words. Bella was very surprised by this and demanded an explanation, but Richard and Ileana. Looking at each other, they ignored her words. Looking at these two, Bella could not understand why she was unaware of the events. She hugged the heroine tightly and was surprised how she increasingly reminded her of Robert. Noticing that Ileana had cut her hair and how it suited her, the wizard asked the heroine about it, to which she agreed, and spoke about how difficult it was for her to take care of her hair. Richard hurried the girls by telling them they had to leave soon, and Bella, having clarified if she was thinking correctly, spoke about her task, which was that she only needed to transport them both to the entrance of the Land of Wisdom. Pointing to a spot, she asked Richard and Ileana to separate side by side. Bringing them even closer, she pointed out that, to be like true lovers who are going to get engaged, they will have to show the most tender appearance. Bella said that when they return, they can call her at any time, to which Richard expressed his gratitude. Recalling that she was a wizard, the girl raised her hands in front of her. Gradually starting to gain strength, Bella said that upon her return, the head would suffer greatly from the elders and their daughters. With a serious face, Richard asked to tell them that he was mistaken. Smiling and saying that he would definitely pass it on, the wizard directed his power towards Richard and Ileana. After flashes that lit up the entire room, the heroine slowly opens her eyes. Finding herself in a completely different room, she hears Richard explaining that they are in the guest room at the entrance to the Land of Wisdom. Ileana looked around and realized that she had already been here in the past with her brother or her uncle, and nothing had changed since then. Suddenly, a voice called Richard and Ileana. A man dressed in closed clothing stood in front of them and asked them to follow him. And he also informed them that as soon as they entered the temple, they would receive more information from the priest and the priestess. Richard agreed and turned his gaze towards the heroine. Filled with confusion, Ileana got up and fixed her gaze on the floor. The moment with her brother, who asked her why this place was called the Land of Wisdom, began to clearly appear in her head. Having answered this question by saying that the King of Wisdom lives here, she decided that her brother took her for a fool for asking this. Hearing her brother laugh after her answer, she looked at him. Taking his sister's hand, Robert praised her for giving one of the reasons. Walking further and further behind the stranger, Ileana heard Richard ask her if she knew why this place was called the Land of Wisdom. The girl replied that this was because the King of Wisdom lived here. But at the same time, she added that everything here was created and cultivated by common people. Agreeing with her, the boy pointed out that people are capable of creating harmonious reconstructions several times superior to themselves. So this can be considered a manifestation of genius. Realizing that the heroine was flying in her thoughts, he called her by name. With an expression of shame on her face, she apologized for this. Seeing the girl's confused state, Richard did not know at all how to help her. Approaching, he carefully touched Eliana's hand. Amazed by this, the girl sharply raised her head and looked at the young man in surprise. A smile appeared on her face, and she thought about how warm everything was with him. Taking Richard's hand, Eliana felt as if the wind in the land of wisdom had calmed down. As if consoling her. The boy was surprised that the heroine could feel the wind, although he said that perhaps she was simply mistaken. The young man spoke of the possibility that perhaps she was not mistaken, because when the force begins to flow, the object of this force feels differently. When Eliana asked him if he felt something similar, the leader explained that he also feels the essence of darkness, like the essence of wind in his family. Seeing the girl's surprised face, Richard began to talk about how he first felt this power. Being a little younger than the heroine. Opening his eyes in the middle of the night, he saw total darkness flowing around him. Realizing that it was wrapping around his body, he jumped out of bed and headed to the window to open it. At that moment, he realized that his parents were no longer in this world. Learning everything Richard had to go through, the heroine was very surprised. Since her parents normally returned unharmed after getting rid of monsters, she couldn't even think about it. Trying to dispel the situation somehow, Eliana said she had heard that her parents were very strong. And Richard agreed with her. He said that this was precisely the reason for all the elders' efforts to prevent their parents from fighting. If this happened, then the main wall of the fortress would tremble from their fight. Amazed by this, Eliana asked if her parents fought with real swords and, agreeing, she spoke of her mother, who also shot a bow. With pride in her words, she said that her archery skill was known both inside and outside the fortress. And her father boasted about his wife's skills almost all the time. Moved by how kind her parents were, Eliana continued listening to the boy's stories. Suddenly, she thought about the possibility that she too could learn to wield a weapon. The heroine explained this desire to the young man, telling him that she wanted to become at least a little stronger. Trying to convince Eliana that weapons could not make her strong immediately. He explained that she herself could reach one of the directions of strength. But in fact, Richard believed that the heroine already had enough power. Eliana felt embarrassed by Richard's genuine kindness towards her. In response to Richard's gratitude, she exclaimed that all his words were pure truth. Because of the girl's strong words, the stranger leading them turned to her. Realizing this, Eliana lowered her tone and noted that even though the boss was joking with her, he was still sincerely worried about her. Gently taking the boy with both hands and smiling, she said that he was such a warm person. After these words, the young man looked at the heroine with an emotional expression. Suddenly, that stranger called them, apologizing for interrupting the conversation between two lovers. Upon reaching the temple, Eliana told Richard that they would now separate to receive the sacred permission, and that each of them, waiting in their own place, would have to cleanse their body and their mind. They will not be allowed to see each other until the next morning, so any words they want to say to each other, they will have to say now. Richard took the girls' hands and said they would see each other later. Eliana, opening her palms, was surprised to see the carefully folded paper that was in them. Richard asked her to remain silent a little longer and told her to read the note when she was alone in the room. With a smile on her face, Eliana, clutching her hands to her chest with a note inside, thanked the young man. The boy said goodbye to the heroine and followed his protagonist. Turning around, he looked at the heroine who was walking in the opposite direction. Due to the fact that it was impossible to use force here without permission, Richard could not protect the girl if she were in danger. Convinced that everything would be fine, the boy looked forward to the next day, when his anxiety would definitely disappear. Upon arriving in the hall, the attendant explained the order in which the food would be served. And since the time for breakfast had already passed, the next meal was scheduled after the afternoon prayer. Hearing Eliana's words of thanks, she simply ignored her. She said that as soon as the girl heard the bell ring, she should drink holy water in the prayer room to let God in. Eliana thought about the words, which made it clear to her that there were 3 bell tolls in total, the second of which meant the start of the prayer, and the third the end. Previously, The priestess accompanying her added to all this the words about the ringing of bells on a moonlit night. And at dawn, when the moon sets. Since the time for the afternoon prayer was approaching, she advised her to bathe as quickly as possible, since it was a mandatory part before entering the room. When Eliana asked her if it was necessary to bathe before the dawn prayer, the priestess nodded. The heroine was completely bewildered when she heard an argument about the need to thoroughly clean her dirty body. And mortal, having said that tomorrow morning she would take her to the place of the sacred permission. She was about to leave, but Eliana stopped her. Frowning, the priestess turned to look at her furiously. Embarrassed, the heroine apologized and asked if she could take a walk in the garden. Glancing sideways at the girl, she noted that there was no point in wandering around the sacred temple with such a dirty body, and that if she had no more questions, then she could leave. The stunned Eliana could not understand her words, since no strange odor emanated from her. Noticing a slight sticky feeling on her body, she decided to wash as quickly as possible. Carefully closing the door, Eliana entered the bathroom. As she slowly put her foot into the tub, she could not help but notice how cold the water was. Now the words that the local priests bathe in cold water have made their whole truth clear. Getting closer to the water temperature, Eliana thought about how similar it was to all the cold blood of people here together. Shivering from the cold after the bath, Eliana sat by the brightly burning fireplace. She would never have imagined that warmth was so important, because if she hadn't finished washing so quickly, she would have frozen to death. The heroine could not stop repeating in her head words about her dirty body that needed to be thoroughly washed. Recalling that same gaze, she could not remember ever being looked at with such condemnation. But understanding this, she was not surprised, since everyone in her family's castle was very kind to her. The only times they scolded her was when she and her brother entered the kitchen and ate all the desserts. It also happened that they were angry because she set fire to the autumn leaves in the garden. Eliana always hid behind her brother at times when they were scolded for another reckless act. Elder Alfred was not happy because at the same time, he involved in their games the young mistress whom he was responsible for. Remembering the president, Eliana wondered if everything was fine with him. Looking at the dresser where there was a note from Richard, she finally decided to read it. Taking the unfolded paper in her hand, she read the boy's words that she should not take all the words seriously. And actions, since generally the temple is not particularly friendly to people from the outside world. The young man made Eliana smile, telling her that they did not have the slightest right to judge her because they did not know how wonderful she really was. Clutching Richard's message to her chest, Eliana marveled at all his kindness. Previously, she had always been afraid of this guy and was frozen by his every look, never allowing herself to look into those eyes. After thinking for a while, the girl began to regret that she could not understand what kind of person he really was before. The bell calling for the evening prayer dispelled the heroine's thoughts. Looking towards the door and putting the note aside, she entered the room specially designated for prayer, without closing the door completely to see at least something. Looking around, Eliana noticed that it was very narrow there, and there was not even a single window through which a single ray of light could enter this darkness. This atmosphere reminded her more and more of the same closet she was in. The heroine, gripped by panic, began to make sure that she should not remember the horrors that happened while she was in the temple. And at that moment, it was important for her to return home with Richard's surname. Carefully closing the door, Eliana noticed how the wind blew from nowhere as she began to approach the prayer place, as if wrapping around her body everywhere. Realizing that it did not want to let her in, Eliana apologized to the wind, because she was obliged to go through this marriage ceremony regardless of the cost. Beginning to say a prayer, the heroine carefully took and drank the holy water to let God into her. While the girl was praying, Joseph burst into her room full of anger. Hearing her uncle's voice calling her by name, Eliana was dumbfounded with horror. Having dropped the holy water, the girl turned around and saw him standing in front of her. From fear, tears appeared in the girl's eyes, and she covered her trembling lips with her palm. Trying not to scream, With a smiling face, he noted how long it had been since he had seen his beloved niece. When Ileana and Robert were still children, they adored their uncle. Despite their parents' prohibitions, he always brought their favorite sweets. The little brother and sister kept asking him to hold them so he could throw them very, very high. At that moment, they believed that their uncle was a better person and could not even imagine that he would treat them like this in the future. When their uncle lifted Ileana or her brother, a joyful laugh erupted. After the death of their parents, Richard and Ileana, standing by the graves, did not understand at all what they would do. The uncle who appeared behind them spoke of his brother and his wife as wonderful people respected by everyone around them. He called the children, hugged them tightly, and thus calmed them at least a little. But now Ileana was no longer the same little girl, and when she saw her uncle, she trembled with fear. Continuing to look at him in horror, she could not understand how he ended up here in the first place. The heroine addressed him as her uncle, but quickly corrected herself by calling him by his name. Joseph felt a little sad recalling how kind she was to him before. But now she was ice cold, but he admitted that this would be much more correct. As he approached, he carefully touched the girl's hair and began to be surprised by the diligence with which his brother protected her. With a smile on his face, he said that he had guessed his plan to save his sister, even if it meant giving his life. After Joseph said that he would never have thought of Robert's bad idea to hand her over to this monster. Ileana looked at him with an expression of surprise. Removing his hand from her hair, she prevented him from continuing to insult Richard's family. With a smile on his face, Joseph felt that he had not offended anyone at all, because Richard looked like a real monster who ate darkness. The heroine was deeply surprised and dissatisfied when to all this he added the words that this was the reason for his marriage to a girl as small as her. The enraged Ileana could not understand how he dared to speak in that manner, because he himself is a man who killed his nephew for the position of fortress head. Hearing that he himself was the only monster, Joseph looked angrily and with great strength in his hands knocked the heroine to the floor. He could not understand what kind of nonsense his niece was saying, because her brother took his own life precisely because he was afraid to take on such responsibility. With pride in his words, he said that being an uncle who loves his nephews, he was simply forced to sacrifice himself, fulfilling the duties he had refused. Not knowing what to do next, the heroine simply said that the wind would never forgive him for everything he had done. After these words, Joseph, as if freeing himself from his chain, grabbed Ileana by the throat and began to strangle her. With a crazy smile looking at his suffocating niece, he began to threaten her that he could kill her right now. But due to affection, the man still wanted to tell his beloved brother what happened. And for this, he removed his hand from the girl's throat. The words that the hungry monsters liked everything and devoured his body. Not leaving a single piece, they plunged the heroine into a state of shock. Trying not to believe these words, she shouted out loud that all this was a lie. She continued to deny the words, that a funeral could not be held in memory of her brother, since he took his own life. Having explained that he had no other choice, because it was impossible to bury and abandon the decaying body, he continued to smile maliciously. After the girl asked him when he had time to think about this, he pretended to think about it. When she heard the answer that it was after Robert became a contender for the title. Or maybe, since the day of her parents' death, she was stunned. With a smile on his face, the man gave the final answer that all this happened before they were born, when he replaced his brother as head for the first time and tried to shake his power. While his brother had a name and power suitable for an heir, and at the same time a wife and beloved children, Joseph inherited nothing. Having started strangling the heroine again, he said that he received nothing from the family fortress. Pressing Ileana's throat even harder, he shouted that he could only get one thing, but that with great effort and this beautiful wind, it would do him no harm, since he would be the only one to bear the name of this family. Just beginning to lose consciousness, the heroine thought if Richard would be angry if he found out what happened to her. Realizing that what happened would not be her fault at all, she thought that she should be thanked for everything he had done. She barely had time to apologize to Richard. Ileana was about to lose consciousness. Suddenly, a voice called the Joseph who was strangling her. Removing his hands, he and the barely breathing heroine looked towards the door. The priestess who was there asked Joseph if he really wanted to put the saint, who helped him, in an unpleasant situation. Seeing the priestess, Ileana realized that it was the girl who had taken her to the room in the morning, and completely lost consciousness. Joseph stood up, looked at the priestess in surprise, and asked what she was talking about. Although he didn't care if Ileana died, he believed that killing in the land of wisdom was an inappropriate act. After looking at the heroine, the dissatisfied man decided to do it elsewhere. When a knight burst into the room to announce that Elder Alfred would arrive soon, Joseph didn't even listen to him. He ordered the boy to take Ileana out of the temple as quickly as possible, and only looked at him with a threatening gaze when he asked again. Upon waking up and slightly opening her eyes, Ileana recognized a familiar voice. Ileana remembered well how once, when she and her brother were little, they both greeted this soldier, despite all his refusals. Then Robert explained this to her by telling her that she was greeting the brave knight of her family's castle. Thinking that the children had already done something, Elder Alfred called them. Seeing him, he and his brother were very happy. Having asked not to swear, Richard, hugging his sister, said that they had not done anything yet. Addressing the knight, Alfred asked him to take care of the children, because without supervision they might do who knows what. Placing his hand on his head, the elder said that he expected it. The knight did the same in response, and, with a smile full of happiness, said that he would guard them with all responsibility. Turning around, he saw how Ileana and Richard were very happy that he would play with them today. Embarrassed, the knight clarified that he had an order to guard them and not play with them. Wondering what the word protect means, Ileana heard an explanation from her brother, who said it means the same as guard. Their conversation was interrupted by the knight's sneeze, and looking at him, they noticed that he felt cold. Having asked the knight to give her his hand, Ileana initially disconcerted him with this. When she placed the bag in his palms, he was very surprised, and Robert explained to him that Adam's magic had been cast on him. With a radiant smile, Ileana said that she had just protected his hands, and now he was not cold. Consistent with this, a smile appeared on his face. Trying to flee the temple as quickly as possible, the knight noticed nothing in his way. Stumbling, he fell to the floor with a loud scream, and at the same time dropped the bag in which Ileana was. The knight picked him up in fear, and told him that they had not yet left the land of wisdom. The heroine sitting there began to hear the knight say that he also had no other choice, because if he disobeyed the boss's order, they would kill him. Trying to express all his repentance, the soldier hoped that she could understand him. An unexpected shout that he was an ungrateful traitor stopped the knight. Hearing a familiar voice, the heroine realized that it was an elder. Alfred was out of breath before them and was furious at the betrayal of this common soldier. And rank. He believed that after this act, the boy would no longer dare to call himself a knight of this family's castle. Trembling with fear, he could not understand how the old man could reach this place so quickly. Pointing at the bag, Alfred asked if the guy was going to put it on the floor, to which he shouted, and began to back away. Firmly grabbing the bag, the old man ordered that it be handed over to him as quickly as possible. He carefully placed the bag on the floor and asked Ileana if she was all right. Untying the bag, the old man released the girl and removed the remaining ropes. Thanking the wind, he tightly hugged the heroine in his arms. Continuing to calm Ileana, he shouted at the knight again for being ungrateful, and doing this to her mistress, despite all her great kindness. Not knowing what to do next, the frightened soldier backed away. Alfred was very happy that everything was in order, and told Ileana that as long as she was with them, the wind would never forget the way to this place. Slowly beginning to get up, the heroine said that very soon she would become part of Richard's family, and this would cause the power of the wind to disappear. Having listed all the rumors that had circulated during this time, Alfred said that although no one can see the wind, he knows everything, so he himself is not going to believe any nonsense. From these words, Ileana felt much more warmth in her soul, and a smile shone on her face. Looking at them in horror, the soldier understood that if he left everything as it was, they would definitely kill him. With a trembling hand, he touched the sword hilt, and another plan appeared in his head. Ileana listened attentively to the elder's explanation of why Joseph could not go against his commitment. He advised the girl to hide in a safe place until the wind completely calms down inside her. But she did not understand what would happen then to her family's castle. Answering her question, Alfred said that he would wait until she became a worthy successor and returned to the fortress. All the old man's words about devotion made Ileana's eyes fill with tears. Gently taking the heroine's hands, he, being the man who occupied the place of her grandfather, congratulated her on her engagement. With tears in her eyes, Ileana said that she would definitely return and take her family's surname. Believing his words, he still continued to hold her hand. Beginning to get up from the ground, they saw the knight running towards them. With the intention of killing Ileana, he ran towards her screaming with a sword in his hands. With horror in her eyes, she saw how at the last moment Elder Alfred covered her with his body and received the blow. Realizing that not everything had gone according to his plan, the knight looked at the injured Alfred. The frightened heroine watched as the elder got up and angrily began to scold the knight for the fact that, in addition to failing his mission, he had also killed Elder Alfred, who stood in his way. After the old man's words that he should disappear if he understood everything, the knight ran away screaming. Ileana grabbed the fallen Alfred and saw how quickly blood was flowing from his wound. She started screaming and asking for help, but her attempts were in vain. Having asked to wait a little to bring the wizard, Ileana heard the elder's refusal because he knew her body better than anyone. Wiping the tears from Ileana's face, he said that she was the sacred daughter of his family, loved by the wind. And he asked her never to forget it. Ileana tearfully watched as his hand fell to the ground after saying his last words. She still remembered with what joy she always ran to Elder Alfred with her brother. The heroine sat down in tears next to the cooling body of the elder and begged him not to leave her. Still not believing what happened, Ileana saw how the priests covered his body. All the priests ignored her question about where they were taking his body. The priests kept Ileana begging them to tell her what they were going to do with his body. Thinking that they had told her to wash the blood from her mortal body as quickly as possible, Ileana bathed. The priestess who opened the door decided to look at the girl. Clenching her fist, she blamed herself and begged the elder to forgive her. She blamed herself because she could have protected her elder and her brother if she had the power. Remembering Alfred's words that she needed to become part of Richard's family, Ileana cleared all thoughts from her head and set a goal to gain power. No matter what. Upon leaving the bathroom, Ileana noticed that they had brought new clothes, which were no different from the previous day. The priestess behind her noticed, with disgust, that the girl's bath had taken too long, and that preparations must begin as quickly as possible. Ileana, who began to talk about the fortress, was immediately interrupted by the priestess, saying that she could not answer such useless questions. Remembering that this is the land of wisdom, she said that the girl's task is to dress quickly and go where the king and the high priest are waiting. Despite all this, Ileana firmly insisted that they bring her the dress they had brought from her family's fortress immediately. The priestess did not understand at all with what intentions the girl said such a thing. But the heroine who interrupted her convinced her. Ileana interrupted all the priestess's discontent, saying that she was only trying to fully comply with the rule that whoever goes to meet the king and the high priest must wear the best clothes they have. Saying that she would check if the dress the girl was talking about existed, the priestess left the room. Ileana understood how responsible Elder Alfred was, so she was convinced that he had brought her the outfit. Even being the daughter of his family, she had no reason to lose face, so it would be good to wear this particular outfit. While waiting for Ileana at the meeting place, Richard thought that she was a little late, and there was a possibility that something had happened. At that moment, Ileana just arrived, dressed in a beautiful long dress, which she complemented with a translucent veil adorning her hair. Looking at the girl, he realized that this dress represented the strength of her family. And he wondered how he could use it. The idea that something definitely happened that night dissipated with Ileana's call. Reaching out, she invited Richard to AIR to ask for it together. Looking at the heroine, he nodded and took Ileana's hand. With a request to enter the Supreme Temple, the priests opened the doors. While bowing before the king and the high priest, Ileana and Richard were asked to stand up and look at them to understand if there was a hidden lie in their confession. Addressing Richard and telling him that he had made an unusual noise, the king asked him if it would be better to wait a little longer, since Ileana was only 14 years old. To this question, Richard explained that his entire family does not tend to postpone decisions until later, and their patience has already melted away, being absorbed by the land of wisdom. The king knew very well that Richard was characterized by cold-blooded behavior, and he was only surprised how important this girl was to him. Thinking that he had already lost his parents and his best friend, Richard understood that even when he saw Ileana in the closet, he had already decided everything for himself. Saying that Ileana was the only beloved creature left to him, he asked the king and the high priest to allow their unblemished marriage. The king was very surprised by Richard's unusual behavior and only looked at him in amazement. Before he could say a word, he looked at the high priest, who was indignant about the request for permission for this unblemished marriage. Angrily, he asked Richard if he had heard his request correctly. With a smile, the priest truly did not believe that Richard had arrived so quickly in the land of wisdom just to marry a young woman. Addressing Ileana, he waited to see what the girl would say, because she also had a voice and a vote in all this. The heroine joked that if she didn't have that right, she wouldn't have dared to invite everyone to gather. The high priest asked how she could know her feelings for Richard at 14 years old. He was sure that one day she would deeply regret this mistaken decision at such an early age. Saying that she could find someone better, the priest, dissatisfied, asked again if Richard was suitable for her. Not knowing the answer to this question, she only said that he is the only thing she has. Clutching her palms, the heroine was sure that there would never be anyone who could compare to Richard. Being in a collapsing world she had previously trusted, only Richard extended a hand to help her. With pride in her words, the heroine said Richard was ideal for her. The high priest, even more enraged, believed that all these words directed at Richard were blasphemous and could only be used towards God. Hearing the priest shout in her direction that dirty strangers dared to say such sacred words, they looked at him confused. Unexpectedly, without allowing him to finish, the king stood up and began to say joyfully that this was completely normal, because loving your spouse as God commands is an integral part of the Holy Scriptures. Looking up at the king, who fully felt all her feelings and determination, Ileana and Richard looked in his direction with relief. The high priest was dumbfounded by the king's words that he had no reason to be against their marriage, and therefore he also had to give his consent. Possessing the wisdom given by God, the king gave permission for the marriage between Ileana and Richard. After asking them to rise from their seats, he said that Richard and Ileana must strengthen their mutual devotion with the breath of God. Beginning the prayer process for the marriage, the king carefully handed over the sacred book. While reading the prayer, the high priest told Ileana and Richard to confess together. Ileana felt the wind swirl around her fingers in a familiar way. She remembered very well how, when Robert hugged her, a gentle wind enveloped them both. Looking at Richard, the heroine felt a wild desire to share this wind with him. Looking at Ileana, he carefully took her extended palm. A beautiful smile shone on his face, which seemed to illuminate everything around him. Looking tenderly into each other's eyes, Richard said he was giving everything to Ileana. He was willing to accept all her decisions and act according to her wishes. When they received the privilege of being part of each other's lives, the priest asked to see the symbols of their devotion. Not understanding what symbols they were talking about, the heroine did not understand at all what to do. Seeing how worried the girl was, he began to rummage in his chest, telling her there was nothing to worry about. In his hands was a box, inside which were 2 beautiful rings with a crescent moon. After his request, Ileana carefully placed the black ring on his ring finger. Richard, asking the heroine to come closer, fastened the chain from which the ring hung around her neck, and said that she still could not put it on. Embarrassed, the heroine looked at Richard in surprise. At that moment, he also looked at the heroine with a smile that was not bright, but radiant on his face. Loudly calling Richard and Ileana, Bella approached them more and more. The breathless girl first asked how everything went. With a smile on her face, Ileana showed her the chain and the ring, making it clear that everything went well. Having already assumed such an outcome of events, Bella happily rushed to hug them both. In response, Ileana also hugged the girl tightly, with a sincere smile on her face. Richard looked around, after the wizard had transported them from the land of wisdom. Anne was surprised. He did not understand why they were at the fortress entrance and not in their room. With a bright smile on her face, Bella told him about her debt to Robert, who asked her to prevent him from taking the heroine before she turned 18. Without saying anything about it, the boy was about to leave, but the girl stopped him. Realizing that he didn't even want to ask a single question, she gave him a hint to remember the words he said before leaving for the land of wisdom. The only thing he could think of was how she spoke about the grievances of the elders and their daughters. Bella rejected his request for another hint and said that if he didn't understand, he would be stuck here forever. Turning around, she wanted to ask Ileana if she had any assumptions. Turning around, she looked around and could not understand where the girl had disappeared. Hearing someone's voice saying that he was a stupid boyfriend who didn't even know where his girlfriend had gone. He raised his head. Looking up, he saw Ileana, who understood nothing, and William and Charles standing next to her. One of them noticed that it seemed the boyfriend was in trouble, and the other asked the girl if this seemed true to her. Not understanding what kind of fuss these brothers were making, she loudly asked them about it. Appearing out of nowhere, Olivia, one of the elders' daughters, explained to him that they were simply following the old traditions of their family and celebrating the boss's marriage with a banquet. By explaining to him that he must find his kidnapped girlfriend before dawn, she said that if he doesn't have time to do it, the marriage he worked so hard for will be in vain. Olivia tenderly placed her palms on Ileana's shoulders and asked her brothers to take care of everything else, to which they agreed with a smile. Suddenly, Ileana heard Richard call her name. Asking her to wait a little, he told her he would find her quickly. With a smile on her face, she nodded in agreement. Running quickly, she saw 2 brothers imitating her words, blocking her way. In response to her words that they might suffer from so much tenderness, Richard said that only he himself would remain the victim. They conveyed Olivia's words that a small scar is normal, and Bella's, who generally said that everything will be fine as long as he is alive. Placing their swords in front of them, William and Charles asked to accept their sincerest congratulations on their wedding. Ileana looked around and saw a crowd of people crowding the busy streets. When Olivia asked her if she was worried, the girl, without hesitation, gave a negative answer. Knowing that it was a day that brought joy to everyone in this fortress, she thought this would not be a big difficulty for the leader. Hugging the girl tightly, Ileana realized how kind she was. Asking to remove such a polite address, Ileana said that Olivia could safely call her by name. When Olivia asked her to do the same, Ileana tenderly said her name, calling her sister at the same time. The girl could not resist such sweet behavior and said that Ileana was incredibly dangerous for her heart. Loud shouts made the girls turn in the direction where Richard was fighting with 2 brothers. William and Charles jumped up and immediately began to attack the guy. Despite all the brothers' tricks, Richard managed to evade their swords. After tricking them, he made the 2 boys crash into each other. Olivia watched Charles and William fighting casually and did not understand at all what they were doing. One of the brothers, seeing Olivia, began to wave his hand at her, and despite all her shouts to be attentive and look forward, he still didn't have time to react. Realizing that the guy was distracted, Richard kicked the sword out of his hands, and the weapon fell to the ground with a loud sound. After seeing how screwed Charles was, Olivia told him to recover. Charles accused her of not being able to distinguish his brother and pretended to be William. Not understanding what his brother was talking about, William began to shout that the girl under no circumstances should fall for this. Furious, Olivia kept trembling watching as Charles and William continued to figure out which of them was who. Realizing that the brothers were too busy arguing, Richard carefully ran past them. Olivia knew she had made a big mistake when she put those clowns on her first line of defense. To Ileana's surprise that in addition to this, Richard also had other similar lines. The girl explained that everyone should make sure that the boyfriend receives his girlfriend as late as possible. To her words that Ileana would also have to do something, the heroine wondered if this would also be a tradition in this fortress. With a smile, Olivia said that this was a very important tradition. Having defeated all the soldiers blocking their way, Richard was getting closer and closer to his goal. The boys' cry that they had seen the head made him shudder. He saw a group of cheerful children with wooden swords trying to block his way. Disconcerted, he simply passed by the still cheerful children, who at least somehow tried to block his way, waving their small swords and fists. After Richard passed them, he saw the 3 elders sitting at the table. One of them, hitting the table with a wooden wine jug, expressed his discontent that Richard had arrived very late and had almost handed over his elder position to his daughter. Richard turned to the 2 soldiers behind him and asked how long ago the elders opened a warehouse with alcohol. And he received the answer that this probably happened yesterday morning. Richard knew very well that when joyful events happen in the fortress, the elders will not move until they drink all the alcohol brought to them. Looking at the remaining barrels, he realized that this would take a couple more hours and could continue late into the night. After telling the boy to quickly sit down with them, the elders with smiling faces decided to show him their secret power, which was passed down from generation to generation. With a sigh, Richard approached them and was ready for anything. Opening the door and entering the room, Ileana was delighted to see Bella sitting there. She explained to the heroine that, being the fortress wizard, it was not difficult for her at all to get here in a second. When Ileana asked where everyone else was, Bella suggested that they were probably having fun now and causing chaos, because they were very happy that the fortress head was getting married. After telling the heroine to sit down, Olivia announced that she would now bring her something to eat. Looking down, Ileana thought that everyone was very kind to her, and that's why sometimes she had the impression that she was receiving more than she deserved. Ileana thanked the girl for the warmed milk, while Bella offered Olivia a drink. The heroine looked at their words about it being good to drink during conversations with bewilderment. They explained that, following the fortress traditions, while the groom tries to win back his bride, she must tell her friends how she fell in love with him. Eager for an answer, they began to ask Ileana what it was that made her fall in love with the head. The heroine looked at Bella and Olivia in surprise and didn't even know what to answer them. After convincing the girl not to worry, they told her that for them trust is as important as their own lives. With a cheerful smile, both girls promised to cherish her confession forever. Realizing that the girls mistook her and Richard for a real couple, she realized that the elders and others were doing the same. After thinking for a while, Olivia realized that it was quite cruel to force Ileana to reveal the good side of the chapter. Bella agreed and said that although he is her friend and she doesn't want to talk about it. Is it boring? After asking what kind of person he was, she remembered that when she first saw Richard, it seemed to her that he was not a person at all. Ileana admitted that when she first saw Richard, his facial expression did not change at all. And at the same time how tall he was, it seemed to her that he was just wearing a human mask. Hearing the heroine compare him to a sculpture, Bella could only agree. But along with her comparison, Ileana added that this sculpture was made of everything magnificent in the world. Suddenly, realizing all the words, Bella and Olivia shouted loudly in surprise. Ileana agreed with their words and immediately liked Richard's appearance. Even before this, Ileana only knew about his beautiful appearance, and that was all. Although Robert sometimes called him tough. But now the heroine managed to understand him from a completely different side. Assuming she knew why her brother liked the head, she said with a bright smile that Richard was a very kind person, and that there would be no person who would not like this kindness. Thinking that the elders should drink less, Richard let them sleep at the table. Thinking that she was very lucky that there was no alcohol in the other rooms, he headed towards his wife. Noticing that Ileana was tired, Olivia suggested she close her eyes for a while, as she must be tired after going to the land of wisdom. Supporting the girl against her shoulder, Olivia didn't even bother to notice the fact that Richard was about to arrive. With a bright smile on her face, she said she would always remember today's Ileana. And if she arrived tired when she was there, then she herself would tell her everything about today. Olivia really didn't want the girl to have a reason to return, and she deeply hoped that, when Ileana grew up, she would fall deeply in love and be happy. Upon entering the girl's bathroom, Richard was very surprised by what he saw. The tired Ileana was sleeping soundly on Olivia's shoulder, resting her head against hers. After sitting on the bench, he decided not to wake her and was already ready to return. Hearing Ileana's voice, he turned towards the girl. Rubbing her eyes, she told him that she had fallen asleep while waiting for him. Ileana got up and held the sleeping Olivia, thus preventing her from falling. She told Richard that the girls had drunk too much, and in that state, it wouldn't be easy to wake them up. Worried about the heroine, the boy asked her if she should sleep a little longer. Since Alina knew that if she didn't go with him, their marriage would be null and void, she rejected this offer. Although Richard told her that no one but them could break the marriage, since they had already taken an oath before God. Ileana did not want him to become the laughingstock of the town. Worried that he would be called that since he immediately lost his fiancée, Ileana heard from Richard that he could simply be in denial. With a bright smile, she said that being his wife, she could not allow this to happen. Richard was very surprised by these words and looked at the girl with an expression of astonishment. Having said that they should return to the room, the heroine walked forward. But she stumbled and quickly began to fall. Reacting quickly, Richard managed to catch the falling Ileana. The frightened heroine thanked the boy and pointed out that she should have been more careful. She was surprised how abruptly Richard turned and said that he would accompany her to her room. Upon leaving the room, Ileana followed Richard ahead. Hearing the heroine sneeze, Richard stopped and turned around. He approached Ileana and, throwing his tailcoat over her shoulders, asked the girl to put it on, because it got quite cool at night. Thanking him for this, the heroine noticed that the atmosphere had become somewhat awkward. Continuing, she decided to ask what everyone thought of their relationship. Without hearing a word from the boy, Ileana clarified that she believed they knew the truth. But it seems there was a misunderstanding, saying that she had already told the elders and their retinue that they were engaged. She explained that he, as the head of the fortress, should only prioritize the interests of the fortress, since nothing good would come of everyone finding out that he was interfering in another fortress's affairs because of a friend. He believed that would be the best option, and although everyone doubted it, they said nothing against it. In response to his regret that this made her uncomfortable, Ileana began to deny it. She said that Bella and Olivia began to ask her about the reason why she fell in love with him, although she thought for a long time how to answer them. The heroine confidently told them how wonderful and affectionate he was. Realizing she shouldn't have said that, the confused heroine heard Richard say that she shouldn't have said that. Noticing her blushing face, Ileana realized that Richard was embarrassed by her words. Suddenly, Charles and William appeared in front of them, who, upon seeing that Richard had found his fiancée, became sad because they could no longer tease him. To his question about whether they would return from where Olivia was, Richard gave an affirmative answer. The brothers were quite sure that Olivia had definitely fallen asleep somewhere inconvenient because she was drunk, and they decided to go look for her. Since they had already done all the work, they decided to simply leave E.R. to Richard and Ileana. Wishing them a good rest, the brothers sincerely congratulated them on their marriage and left. Admiring the ring that shone brightly under the moonlight, Ileana felt as if she were wearing a star. These words immediately reminded Richard that his mother had said the same thing. At the same time, he explained to Ileana that this ring had been passed down from generation to generation in his family. The heroine thought this ring was too valuable to be in her possession. But the boy assured her that even if so, it would be troublesome to return the ring. He explained that if she returned the ring, it would mean the end of their marriage, and she would leave this fortress. At the same time, leaning towards the girl, he added in a whisper that this would happen someday anyway. Ileana was surprised to see how Richard said with a smile on his face that, however, that would not happen today. Although he never said it, the heroine was the only one for him, and therefore, there is no one better for whom this ring is suitable. Looking at the ring, the embarrassed heroine simply accepted it as a fact. The girl understood that she was the only one her brother left behind after his death. But as soon as everything returns to its place and peace returns, she will leave this fortress. Clutching the ring to her chest, she promised to cherish it with all her heart. The heroine was sure that one day she would return it with a smile on her face. With a smile on his face, Richard said that when this happens, he will gladly accept this ring. He was very happy that Ileana really had fun today, and he was even more convinced that all the people in this fortress are very cheerful and kind. After thanking him, the heroine returned his coat and headed to her room. Upon opening the door, she stopped and looked in Richard's direction. He looked at Ileana in surprise, ready to listen attentively to what she had to say. With a bright smile on his face that seemed to illuminate everything around him, he said goodbye until the next day. Early on a sunny morning, Ileana, approaching the window, began to tell her deceased brother that a week had passed since she married Richard. With a bright smile, she mentally told him that everything was fine with her, and that she had almost gotten used to living here. Now she can do her hair herself and has even learned to make buns perfectly. Asking him not to worry too much about her, Ileana left her room. Upon opening the doors, Ileana's joyful expression gave way to bewilderment upon seeing a piece of raw meat in front of her. She didn't understand how something like that could be lying in front of her room door. While preparing for breakfast, Richard was preparing the dishes. At that moment, Ileana arrived, and wishing each other a good day, they heard a mutual greeting. Richard agreed with Ileana's help, who offered to take the plate he was holding. The heroine suggested Bella have breakfast later and heard Richard's approval. Because he knew this girl never woke up on time. Richard confirmed the heroine's words that they would spend the night in the temple. And he said he had already warned Bella about the need to leave early. The boy suggested moving on to the meal, to which Liana, sitting at the table, nodded. Looking at the plate of meat stew, the heroine immediately remembered the raw meat in front of her door. Noticing how the girl was looking at the food, Richard assumed she had no appetite. Continuing to look at the plate in bewilderment, Ileana disagreed with his assumption. In response to his suggestion that he clean the fortress himself, since there are no servants here, Richard agreed and explained that he cleans all the rooms himself. And offices. After her question about who cleans the corridors then, Richard was so surprised that he stopped. After apologizing, he said that he needed to clarify something about that day and that Ileana should not worry about it. The heroine just looked at him surprised and didn't say a word. After Richard asked her what she had planned for today, the girl said she was going to clean the room, take a walk, and feed all the animals in the fortress. Richard reminded her not to forget to read at least one book, to which she exclaimed in surprise. Richard explained to her that she was old enough to learn, and that after Ileana rested, he would hire a good teacher to teach her the basics. Seeing her sad face, the boy said that facial expression would not help to avoid this, because she needed to know at least the basics. Ileana looked at Richard in surprise, for whom this was a great relief, because all children tend to hate school. Getting up from the table, Richard said he would go wake up Bella and asked if Ileana minded if he left first. Although she didn't mind this at all, Ileana realized that she was being treated like a child again. And even though she and Richard had made vows as a married couple, he was acting like a strict teacher. The heroine was very interested in what the relationship between her and the head was. Ileana, who was feeding the dogs, was suddenly called by a voice. Turning around, she saw Charles and William standing behind her, who noticed that she had arrived first. Seeing the bucket, one of the brothers said that he had prepared a real feast for these boys. And Ileana, nodding, told him that this was her last stop. The dog's barks distracted Ileana from her conversation with her brothers, who said that they also came here to clean. She was sure the dog wasn't hungry and just stroked it tenderly. One of the boys behind him said that it seemed his lover would not be able to join the knight's order. He was very surprised that the reason for this was that to join the club you must have at least one scar from a bite from these dogs. The brothers told her that if you make fun of these dogs, they will start chasing you. And they can bite very hard, even through a thick layer of skin. Alina was confused because the brothers took very good care of them. Charles said they had no other choice and explained that there is no animal that hunts monsters better than these dogs. After this, Ileana immediately remembered those same words from her uncle about monsters. She could clearly see in her head the moment when a smiling Joseph said that nothing was left of Robert's corpse, because the monsters had eaten everything without leaving a single piece. Terrible memories were interrupted by the brothers' questions about whether everything was fine with her. Saying that it was time to leave, Ileana quickly escaped, without even noticing that she had left the bucket. Not understanding at all what had happened, Charles and William took care of the fleeing girl. Already at night, Ileana could not sleep, and she assumed that the reason was the memories of her uncle's words. Thoughts spun in her head about whether her uncle was telling the truth, and if her brother had really been devoured by monsters. Hearing a loud sound, Ileana, scared, jumped out of bed and did not understand what it was. Since except for the head, which was not there at that moment, no one should have gone in that direction. Opening the doors, she saw a piece of raw meat, exactly the same as in the morning. When the heroine turned around, she could only see the back and tail of the creature, on which large and sharp growths were visible. Not knowing what to do, Ileana kept looking horrified at the end of the corridor. Gathering her courage, she decided to see what it was, and without ceasing to reassure herself, headed in that direction. With the thought that this fortress must definitely be safe, Ileana reached the end of the corridor. And she turned around. What she saw made the heroine freeze in fear. In front of her, there was a creature almost twice her height, and with many sharp fangs in its drooling mouth. After it began to slowly approach the heroine, she backed away. Recalling that she had definitely seen it somewhere in the book, she realized that there was definitely a monster standing in front of her. Turning sharply, she ran very fast without even looking back. Running out into the street, Ileana, breathing heavily, quickly crossed the bridge between two buildings without sparing effort. Charles and William walked ahead, talking carelessly and cheerfully discussing something between themselves. Suddenly, one of the brothers drew his brother's attention to a small silhouette running towards them. The heroine collided with one of the brothers, and they began to ask the lady what she was doing here so early. And what happened to her? With frightened eyes asking for help, Ileana looked at the boys and said with a trembling voice that she had seen a monster in the fortress. The young men looked at the girl in surprise, amazed by the words she was saying. The brothers looked at each other, wondering if the appearance of a monster in the fortress was impossible. Or not. By morning, the three of them approached Olivia. The girl sat on the sofa, and two boys were next to the elder's daughter. The heroine confirmed the girl's words, who asked her if she had seen the monster in the fortress. And Olivia realized that she seemed to have seen this child. Ileana did not understand what kind of girl she was talking about and just looked at the girl in surprise. Getting up from her chair, Olivia explained that even though she said it was a boy, it was still a monster. A species called Gricklave. Approaching the shelf and scanning it with her gaze, she took out the book she needed, which spoke of the monsters living in the north. With a bright smile on her face, the girl said that although the heroine's classes should start in a couple of days, they would start a little earlier. Ileana then realized that Richard, by a good teacher, meant Olivia, who was very surprised by her words. The book said that the Griff Lab is a monster representing the north and can be easily found in the northern mountains. They usually live in packs due to the need for socialization and are also nocturnal. Many people say that the sight of a flock of griffins flying with large spread wings is especially beautiful. and amazing. Following the description, Ileana clarified that the monster she saw had no wings, to which Olivia told her that it no longer had wings when the leader brought it to the fortress. The elder's daughter herself knew nothing about what happened to it, but since she now lives in the fortress, she became friends with them. She found it very interesting that the monster leaves a piece of raw meat in front of Ileana's door every night. One of the brothers suggested that Greiflav wanted to be friends with his lover, and the other, agreeing, added that he was simply sharing his food. Upon grasping the meaning of these words, Olivia could now assume that the monster had a positive attitude towards Ileana. Both brothers believed that the boss, in any case, should know more about this monster, since he understands its speech. But Olivia said that he is not in the fortress now. The elder's daughter was surprised by Ileana's request to lend her the book. She explained that she didn't want to just sit around and wait for the head to return, because now she was also officially part of this fortress. With all seriousness in her words, Ileana said that she herself would find out everything about the Griffolaves. Olivia, Charles, and William, who were behind her, were very surprised by such a statement from her. The brothers, noticing that this was praiseworthy, carefully stroked the heroine's head with embarrassed faces. Seeing how much they enjoyed touching the girl's soft hair, Olivia got up from her chair. Furious, pointing at the boys, she said with disgust that this could well be considered rudeness towards the fortress owner. Clutching her hands to her chest, Olivia spoke of her desire to come to the fortress every day and stroke Ileana's soft hair in the same way, because before she held back. Charles and William knew that Olivia had always been weak to favors and thought the same of themselves. But this girl's words that she hadn't thought about how unpleasant they would be when they grew up surprised them. William asked his brother if he had heard what Olivia had said about them being unpleasant. And Charles, in tears, said that those words had touched his heart. After the girl said she didn't mean it, Ileana couldn't help but smile at the girl's very sweet behavior. On a sunny day, Richard walked through the temple. Suddenly, a voice called him, and looking up, he saw two priests standing in front of him. After the greeting, one of the priests decided to ask if it was true that he had married. They reported that in the temple, they only talked about this news and their very romantic relationship. At the same time, the priests noticed that although the king has no feelings, it is more noticeable than ever now, and even after the marriage, he could do nothing about it. So apparently, he was in a hurry. Confusion appeared on Richard's face, and looking away, he undoubtedly communicated that he was not in a hurry in the slightest. Seeing the boy's reaction, the priests began to tease him about this, saying that they never thought they would see how embarrassed he was, and they would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. Richard looked bewildered as the two men continued to laugh at him. To his question about whether he really changed his schedule, Richard nodded and explained that he did it so he could return home today because he was worried about leaving Ileana alone. He was very worried because he didn't know what could happen to her during this time, making sure that nothing was likely to happen since they were active at different times. The possibility that Ileana might encounter this monster in the corridor arose in his mind. He truly regretted not having explained everything to her, even if it cost him to accept the whole truth. Richard looked around and noticed a familiar silhouette nearby. Joseph turned around and noticed Richard approaching him. With a stern expression on his face, he ignored his mark. Not having heard the answer, Joseph only laughed at the fact that he, as usual, was very quiet, clarifying that although it was quite late, he congratulated Richard on his marriage with a smiling expression on his face. After these words, only anger and rage were visible on Richard's face, but not gratitude. With an angry look, Richard emphasized that congratulations, especially from him, were unnecessary. Joseph moved a little closer and, laughing, asked in surprise why he was saying such things. Smiling, he expressed his surprise, because for him Richard had become a son-in-law. Richard, with his hand extended towards the belt, realized that the sword he intended to get was missing. The guy directed an angry look at Joseph when he mentioned that weapons are strictly forbidden in the land of wisdom. At the same time, the smiling man expressed all his regret for not having a weapon, since it would have allowed the guy to do whatever he wanted. With an even more evil smile, he suddenly remembered his beloved Ileana and began to ask her if she was okay. With fists trembling with anger, Richard continued to listen to his nonsense about how he was still surprised that a person behaving like a child became the mistress of the fortress. Joseph continued to say that he was worried about whether his niece would treat him well and if she would tarnish his surname. But Richard could no longer listen to him. The man interrupted him and said that he did not like strangers talking so freely about his wife. To these words, Joseph accused him of stealing a small girl to take her as a wife, believing that this made him instinctively. The last drop of patience was over, and Richard, grabbing the man by the neck, lifted him up. With a crazy look, Joseph began to ask him if he was satisfied with his niece, and what he wanted to do by calling him the boss of the monsters. Richard's anger knew no bounds, and he was about to not kill him. The knights with swords behind them would not have allowed Richard to do more than simply grab him by the neck. Richard's hand abruptly released the man's throat, who then grabbed him by the throat. Warning him to be careful not to offend this monster again, Richard turned around and walked away. Taking care of him, Joseph said that this would not last long, because the day would soon come when he would be recognized as the official head. A sunny day gave way to a pink sunset, and the heroine, sitting on a bench surrounded by dogs, was reading a book. She was very surprised when she learned that Griffalaves do not expel the weak from the pack, but on the contrary, they distribute food and live together, because this indicated that the monster was bringing meat to her door. Seeing how much she was studying, Charles and William, who were passing by, said that with such diligence she could become a monster studies teacher. And they asked her if she had learned anything interesting. With shame on her face, Ileana said that she supposed the puppy perceived her as the weak link in the pack. Confirming the assumption, the brother said that the reason he considers her weak is that his lover is very small and cute. In honor of this, they set out to somehow thank this puppy, and Ileana found something in the book that she would like. Upon learning that Griff labs like nuts, the heroine asked the knights if she could find them in the fortress. Even before their departure, Richard arrived at the Griff Clave and apologized and said that he had come to say something, to which she looked at him questioningly. He explained to the puppy that he had brought Ileana here last night and added that they were active at different times, so they couldn't meet. But since she became part of this fortress, the boss asked him to take care of her. Griff Club happily accepted his request and thanked him. On a moonlit night, the griffin woke up as usual after its daytime sleep. Carrying a bucket of raw meat, he imagined how he would share it with his weak lover. As soon as he thought that after she ate this meat, she would immediately become stronger, the puppy became very happy. Taking a bucket and a broom, he left his room. Turning around, he looked in surprise at the one standing outside his room. Ileana standing there was scared and didn't even know what to say. When the puppy came a little closer, it made a sound again, as if asking what the girl wanted from him. Apologizing loudly, the heroine with a quick movement extended a cloth-covered basket in front of her. Carefully moving the cloth aside, the Greiflav took several slices of nuts from the basket. After tasting the treat, he liked it so much that he started dancing with joy. Ileana was very happy that he liked the nuts she brought so much. She was very surprised when the puppy responded by giving her a bucket of raw meat. Extending the bucket, the griffin made a sound, implying that the girl took the bucket from him. After thanking him, Ileana refused such a gift, saying she only eats boiled meat. The room was filled with a bright light, and Richard and Bella appeared in it. The girl asked him what his plan was now. In response to her question, Richard suggested making a schedule from the beginning for the next day, and as early as possible. Already in the morning, Richard apologized for calling Bella so early, to which she told him there was nothing wrong with it, because the situation was quite urgent. To begin with, he wanted to continue yesterday's conversation. According to Richard's conjectures, when the engagement ceremony took place, Joseph was in the lands of wisdom. and at the same time felt the wind magic in the territory. Bella noted that the temple could not have ignored how low-level wizards, who didn't even answer the title, used random magic. She understood that the priest had definitely approved of Joseph's presence. But since Ileana was safe, the fool's plan had failed. Richard listened to a question from the incomprehensible Bella about what drove the high priest to help him in the first place. The boy told her that in the fortress in the land of fire, as well as in the priestess's birthplace, he aspired to the position of the next king of wisdom. Very surprised by this answer, she clarified if he meant the high priest's wife when mentioning the priestess. Richard began to talk about how several years ago the former head of this fortress suddenly died. Since he had no children, people assumed that one of his 3 nephews would take his place and, as expected, the second nephew, who excelled in firepower, took the head's place. Some time later, the youngest niece, Amanda, was chosen as a priestess, and the current high priest took her as his wife. However, there is very little information about the eldest of the 3 nephews, and there is also a possibility that he is plotting something in secret. Along with that, Richard pointed out that there are many questions about the death of the ex-leader. And since they took the power of the temple, people are certainly worried. Bella expressed the opinion that there is a high probability that the high priest is helping the priestess. And this fortress. The girl was dumbfounded, realizing that these people also helped Joseph become the leader. Returning to the girl's thought, Richard said that after becoming head, he would have the right to vote in the election of the king of the land of wisdom. Bella was very surprised by this fact, but Richard calmed her down a bit, telling her that Joseph's position was still temporary. The boy pointed out that if he wants to be officially recognized as leader, then he must train his wind energy. At the same time, Joseph still had to find the fortress wizard, who disappeared after Robert's death. And logically, this would be his most important mission. The words about the wizard reminded Bella that she had just received a report about this. She managed to find Adam's position and, pointing to the place on the map, said that yesterday she felt his magic there. Looking at the map, Richard realized that this place was the city of Revai in the Land of Time. In this city, tourism was more developed than in other fortresses. But at the same time, it was the most criminal. Bella was sure it was definitely his magic, even if it was weak. And she assumed that he hadn't used magic for a long time so that it wouldn't be noticed. She suggested that perhaps he had found himself in a situation where he had to use magic. And Richard had told her they needed to prepare. Bella was very surprised when she suggested leaving tomorrow afternoon. She informed the boy, who was already about to leave, that he was acting too fast, and that Ileana must be tired. Opening the room door, Ileana asked with a bright smile if they had already decided when they would leave. Richard didn't know what to say when Bella said she had called him. Approaching the boy, the heroine told him that the girl had already presented him with the essence of the matter, and it seemed to her that she should definitely go with him to Revai. Richard, with a threatening look, tried to convince the girl, because in the fortress in the Land of Time, there will be many dangerous places. And they don't even have the exact location of the wizard. Interrupting him, Ileana said that this was her personal decision and that she was obliged to find her family's wizard. Richard was very surprised by her words that in case of danger, he would be by her side. With a bright smile on her face, Ileana asked to confirm her words. A drop of embarrassment appeared on the boy's face, and he, at first remaining silent, agreed. Hearing a positive response, Ileana smiled with happiness. Bella continued watching how the heroine agreed to follow all instructions without hesitation. With a smile on their faces, the elders announced that they had prepared everything, and they made a map of the most famous places in Revai. Handing the boy the schedule they recommended, they asked him not to look at it in front of his wife, but to remember it now. Richard looked at the newspaper and said he was very sorry for bothering them, but this was not a honeymoon. The presidents, denying it, angrily attacked the boy because they believed that if the newlyweds went on a trip together, it was definitely a honeymoon. When Richard expressed his idea that they were more interested in this marriage than he was, the 3 elders agreed without hesitation. The boy always believed the elders had no reason to be interested in this. Surprise on one of the president's faces gave way to a smile, and he explained that they had all been watching him since he was a small child. Another president said that, although Richard had overcome great pain, he still became a good person. Along with them, the third elder added that Richard had not lost his ability to appreciate things. Richard was very surprised by the elder's words and for not turning his back on a friend who was in trouble. And they cannot help but respect such character. Looking at them, Richard really didn't want to hear that they already knew the reason why he got married. With a smile on his face, one of the presidents explained that this was the choice of their director, and that, regardless of his view of the world, they had no reason to disagree with him. Richard, looking down and embarrassed by all these words, thanked them. While one of the presidents held him by the shoulders smiling, he expressed his deep gratitude to him again. The elder noticed that lately the boss had been very busy with work. After asking him to leave his work to them for a while, they told him to go to the city with his lover and return only after he had rested a bit. At that moment, Bella, standing around the corner, heard the whole conversation. Already in the city itself, Ileana was very surprised, as it was the first time she had seen such a large city. Richard was very surprised when the girl, grabbing his hand, suggested that they leave quickly. The surprise on his face gave way to a smile, and he agreed with her. Hand in hand, Ileana and Richard moved forward. Before leaving, Bella suggested that if they could persuade Adam in 3 days, they would return here using his magic. But if they do not return within the specified time, the girl will return them to her herself. Bella explained that she could not go to the city with them, as a wizard as powerful as Adam could definitely notice her if she were nearby somewhere. Richard agreed with the girl's words that it would be quite troublesome if she ran away to hide somewhere else, because they barely found him anyway. He also pointed out that she must rest properly during these long-awaited holidays, to which she said she wouldn't get out of bed for anything. She patted Ileana on the head. She wished him a good trip and reminded her that as long as she was with Richard, she would be safe. Saying that she would send them immediately, Bella began to use her power. At the same time, she reminded them to focus on something other than work and having fun. Ileana was very surprised when Richard said that she should first think about names. And he told her that the bosses initially had to go through a legal process to enter another region. But since they walked here in silence today, hiding the fact that Richard is the boss, they must go secretly so that there are no problems between the fortresses. When the girl asked him what she should call him, the boy said she could call him whatever was most convenient for her. After thinking about it, Ileana decided to call Richard Lindo, cute, and he didn't even know what to say, surprised. The people next to them, hearing this, began to wonder if they were a married couple. Despite the age difference, the heroine was surprised when the boy asked her to give him another nickname, because she and he were married. Ileana remembered very well that in her family's fortress, wives were called exactly that. Richard put his hand to his chest and asked her to simply call him by his name, and he would address her in the same way. Ileana could not understand how she could call the boss by his name and if it would be normal for her. The boy assured her that everything would be fine because they had already done it in the fortress. Confused, the girl accepted Richard's proposal. The boy was very surprised when he felt Ileana reaching out for his palm. Taking his hand, the heroine offered to look around, calling the boy by his name. Seeing the shop, the girl called Richard to see how beautiful hats were there. Marveled by the beauty, Ileana took one of the hats that she also liked. After trying it on, the smile on the girl's face shone even brighter, and she asked Richard how it looked, and if this hat suited him. Smiling, the boy said that she looked good in it. After asking him to take a look, the heroine handed him the hat and was sure it would suit him. When Richard put it on, the girl said he looked very good. Confusion appeared on the boy's face, and at that moment, Ileana chose a hat for Freddie. Richard looked at the heroine with a terrifying look and asked her who Freddie was. Realizing she had never told Richard anything about him, she revealed that Freddie was Adam's student. He is the same age as Ileana, and probably the same height, and at the same time has beautiful sky blue hair. A sudden shout about a thief made the heroine turn to the side. The same thief was running right towards her, whose clothes did not allow anyone to see his appearance. Richard immediately ran to the fallen Ileana and asked if she was hurt, to which she replied that she was absolutely fine. Ileana turned to the thief who had fallen with her and was very surprised. In front of her sat Freddie himself, whose condition was quite bad. Looking up, he realized that it was his lover in front of him. Suddenly, a merchant appeared from the alley where the guy had stolen the bread. Frightened, Freddie ran away without even looking back. Not having time to stop him, Ileana was increasingly surprised by what happened. And the vendor next to them kept shouting after the guy. Hearing the heroine say his name, he assumed they knew each other, but Ileana, dumbfounded, didn't even know what to say to him. After asking him to stop interrogating the girl, Richard politely asked to speak with him about this situation. Sitting at the table, Ileana noticed that it suddenly started snowing, and Richard suggested that perhaps it would stop snowing tomorrow morning. Touching upon the situation, Ileana thanked the boy for paying for the bread, to which he replied that everything was fine. Richard decided to ask the heroine about this thief. Ileana was absolutely sure it was Freddie and that he also recognized her. She couldn't even imagine him stealing bread, and supposed he was in a difficult situation since he was struggling to find food. Richard asked not to worry too much and pointed out the fact that, since Adam's student was here, it meant that he was definitely here with him and that they might soon meet the wizard. Seeing Ileana's worried state, the boy decided to change the subject. He recounted how he found out that she had approached Greiflev and confirming. He asked her if she had found out about this from Q himself. Ileana explained to the incomprehensible Richard that she called him that because he makes those sounds. Richard smiled, and when she asked him if he had already given a name to the Griffin key, she felt him negatively. Richard was very surprised that the girl was not afraid of him, and explained that the words that she was not afraid of him at all would be a lie. But she was very happy that Q was very kind to a stranger like her, and perhaps he was only afraid of her because she judged him by his appearance. Understanding her, Richard added words about how the fact that someone is a monster does not mean that he attacks people. Agreeing with him, Ileana spoke of her intention to look for nuts the next day, because Q liked them very much. When the boy suggested that he would really like bananas, Ileana began to think about what fruit they should buy tomorrow. Seeing all the girls worry and care, Richard couldn't help but smile. With deep sighs, Freddie ran towards the alley, where a man was already waiting for him, who began to be indignant that the guy returned empty-handed. Without having time to catch his breath and saying nothing to the indignation, Freddie immediately told his teacher that he had met Ileana. Adam was shocked by the news that his lover was in Revi. Looking at the purchased items, the heroine listed what they bought as a gift. Richard thought they had already bought gifts for everyone, and Ileana agreed, and commented on the productive day they had with him. Reminding them of pending matters, the boy said that the guide should arrive soon. Hearing a knock on the door, Ileana headed towards it. Opening the door, a man entered the room, introducing himself as the humble servant of Benjamin and Olivia. Ileana was very surprised when the man mentioned the honeymoon that their boss wanted to be unforgettable. But Richard covered her ears and told her not to listen to him. Benjamin conveyed Olivia's words that this was a vacation for young people who had been married for less than a month. Richard stopped disgusted when Ileana, upon learning about spouses and vacations, agreed with his words. The man said there are many things to do in the Revi fort. For example, lovers and couples often went to the snowy shore. Extending his hand, Benjamin with bright eyes said how lucky they were, because today there would be a special event. He said that today there would be an auction, for which they had prepared a special item that the lady could not even imagine. Richard thought that everything looked like an illegal auction, and he could not afford to be told more about it. But the words that, if rumors are to be believed, this object belongs to Ileana's family fortress caused the boy to be surprised. Ileana was stunned when she heard that the object was a golden cup. In Ileana's head, the moment when her brother, handing her this same cup, asked her to treat it very carefully, was clearly visible. Robert told the heroine that this bowl contained a balm and an aromatic oil that would anoint him as heir. Ileana was very surprised when her brother explained that his role was very important, and that it was up to her to take it to the coronation ceremony. Robert asked her not to worry too much, and said with all confidence in his words that Ileana would handle this very well. All of Ileana's thoughts dissipated when, shuddering, she heard Richard call her name. After apologizing if he scared her, he explained that they would arrive there soon, to which Ileana said she was simply lost in thought. Recalling Richard's expression in the recreation center, Ileana asked about the auctions held in the fortress. Richard explained that in the past, auctions were often held in the Revive fortress. And although the auctions themselves were legal, the items exhibited there were often illegally taken. Understanding the whole situation, Ileana asked if that cup was real then, letting the girl remember that Robert gave this cup to the wizard. She suggested that since the wizard was somewhere in the Revive fortress, this story seemed quite probable. The words that she still didn't know how the cup ended up at the auction made the girl think. And she realized that she could only find out when she met Adam in person. Having stopped the carriage, the guide shouted to the guests with a smile that they had arrived. Looking out the window, Ileana waited for the guide to open the door for them. Suddenly, Richard said that although it was not strange for a wizard to have an apprentice, he knew nothing about Adam's apprentice. And Ileana told him that it was her father who brought Freddie to the fortress. At the same time, she suggested that this was why Adam disliked him. When, as a child, he showed his magic on the flowers, the heroine was surprised and considered it incredible, while Freddie himself was unsure about it. With an expression of shame on his face, he said that even his teacher considered this to be a basic skill. Ileana silently looked at the disheartened boy, whose abilities were clearly underestimated. Turning to him and inviting him to look closer, she held out a flower pot. While looking at the flowers, the heroine told him that no matter how much she watered this plant, it would still wither. But thanks to Freddie's magic, her flower regained its beauty. With a smile on her face, she told him with full confidence that he was a magnificent wizard. Freddie's eyes shone at these words, and even more embarrassment appeared on his face. Noticing that his face had turned red, Ileana realized that he was shy. And she just laughed at him. Standing not far from the fortress, Freddie was called by the teacher's voice, who asked him how long he would stay there as a pillar. Adam was sure that the lady had come to look for them after tracking the spell he had cast on the cup. Pointing at Freddie, the enraged teacher yelled at him for not thinking of bringing his lover here when he met her. The boy continued to listen silently, while Adam told him how disappointed he was for simply running away from there. Adam turned around and told him to forget about it, because they had bigger problems than that. Looking at the Revive fortress, Adam said he needed to collect the cup from the auction as soon as possible, which should start very soon. The light illuminated the stage, and on it appeared the host, who, after greeting everyone, announced that he was holding the Revive auction again. Richard and Ileana, standing among the crowd, looked at this host, and he continued talking about how many people had gathered, and the probability that they had already heard about this same gossip. Ileana watched all this bewildered and waited for what would happen next. With a cry of joy, the host announced the start of the auction. The first item up for auction was a damaged sword supposedly belonging to an old nobleman. Upon learning that someone had proposed a price, the host asked if there would be anything higher. Ileana watched as the item finally sold for the original amount. Suddenly, Richard called her, and she turned her head in his direction. He asked her if she wanted any of those things, perhaps a bowl of scented oil. Surprised, she said that nothing was needed and that she was absolutely fine, because she didn't know at all how much it was worth or if it was real. With a smile on her face, she reiterated that the truth was fine when Richard told her not to hesitate to tell him if she ever needed anything. Ileana perfectly understood that if the cup was really real, then Adam might come looking for her. Looking around, she thought that if this happened, Freddie would also come with him. The sudden words of everyone paying attention made Richard, and Eliana looked towards the stage. The girl was very surprised when they said that many already understand what kind of things they are about to see from the north. After the hosts joke that if anyone knows Richard's fortress head, then he should hide it from him, anger and rage appeared on the guy's face. When the host removed the cloth, everyone saw that the object was the egg of a northern monster. The words that it would hatch in a month surprised the audience even more. Richard and Eliana, looking at the monster egg, continued listening to the leader's words that if the monster hatched while they were nearby, it would follow him his whole life. Due to Richard's anger, the veins in his arms became clearly visible. And he perfectly understood that everything the host said earlier was nonsense. Because it was impossible for the existence of such a monster to have such an effect on people. People quickly began offering huge amounts of money for this egg. Seeing how people reacted to this product, Eliana looked at Richard. Suddenly, the eggshell broke, and a monster began to appear from it. But the host did not understand at all what was happening. Richard and Eliana watched in horror as the born monster grew larger and larger. Falling to the ground, the host had no idea what to do, as he was told earlier that it would hatch in a month. In front of him was a huge monster with spikes on its back, from whose mouth huge fangs could be seen, and a long, thin tongue. Seeing the huge monster, a crowd rushed towards the exit, and Richard, covering Eliana with his body, did not allow her to be knocked down. The girl was very surprised and scared when, after everyone left, Richard left. Turning around, he said he would return now and that she should go to a safe place as soon as possible. Elena shouted loudly at him, but he, without turning around, headed towards the monster. The monster's tail began to hit the walls, and the monster itself grabbed the fleeing man. All his cries for help, after a couple of minutes, were replaced by the bites of a monster. Not far from the monster, on the ground, lay the host himself, who was thrown there when the monster increased in size. When he started to get up, his shoulder hit one of the boxes with auction items, and all the decorations fell to the ground with a loud metallic noise. Turning around, he saw a monster already sitting in front of him, from whose mouth saliva was dripping onto the floor. At the horror he saw, the host began to scream, and tears of fear appeared in his eyes. Begging for mercy, he saw how the monster's huge mouth with sharp fangs was already right in front of him. Hearing the sound of the sword, the leader took his hand off his face and opened his tear-stained eyes. In front of him, he saw a guy piercing the monster's mouth with his sword. Still frightened, the host asked him if the monster was dead. In response to his cries that he would quickly kill the monster and pay him generously if he hurried. The young man just looked at him angrily and told him that apparently nothing happened to his mouth. With another swing of his sword, he completely cut the monster's throat. The host watched in horror as the monster's blood began to splash everywhere. Richard said that his greed and arrogance had endangered a large number of people, and jumped away from the monster. After carefully examining the long black hair and dark blue eyes, the host realized that the guy who killed the monster was Richard. The monster's severed head fell onto the host, who shouted his name at the last moment. As Richard touched the dead monster, he thought about how incredibly painful it must have been not to be able to control his growing body. Richard knew very well that a monster could not grow so suddenly. Therefore, there was definitely an external factor from a wizard or someone close to him. With a threatening voice, the guy told someone to stop hiding and come out. But he heard nothing in response. The heroine looked bewildered as Richard talked about what awaited him to decide how to punish him, because he was Eliana's family wizard. With anger on his face, Richard demanded an explanation for what happened on the way to the fortress. Adam adjusted his glasses and, perplexed, did not know what to answer. After they left the building, the wizard was very happy that his lover was safe. And he also noticed how good it was that she and Freddie were unharmed. Adam was very surprised by Eliana's question about what brought them to the city. He began to recount how that night Robert ordered them to flee immediately. Due to the sudden attack by the knights, he and Freddie quickly escaped the fortress. He deeply regretted not being able to fulfill his duty as the fortress wizard, but Eliana told him that everything was fine. after the girl's words about being sure it was difficult for them to be in an unknown area. Adam said that in the city there was nothing but anarchy, and that they had almost had a bowl of aromatic oil stolen from them. Taking out the cup, he said that he was still able to find it due to the fact that he cast a tracking spell on it, and that he was also able to meet the lover here. Looking at the dissatisfied Richard, Ileana told the wizard that the spell he used in the auction room was excessive for solving the problem. She believed that even if it was a monster, doing such a thing to someone who was not yet born was terrible. Adam adjusted his glasses and said that anyway he would have been turned into a plush toy immediately after birth. Richard was filled with disappointment and surprise after these words. Ileana was equally surprised, and Adam said that he simply brought him to his inevitable death a little earlier. At the same time, he added that the most important thing is that he found the sacred cup, which is still as valuable as he is. The fortress wizard, saying that since they had both come for them, the wizard turned around and offered to return to his beloved fortress. Ileana saw how he already wanted to leave without delay and told him to follow him. Adam was very surprised by her words that they could not go to the fortress now. Already at the cafe, Adam was very disappointed because he did not believe that all the rumors were true. Looking up, he yelled at Freddie for daring to eat in such a situation. Reminding them how much they had to go through, Ileana said that Freddie definitely needed to eat a lot. And she suggested that they start eating as soon as possible, for which the wizard thanked her. Addressing Freddie himself, the heroine told him to eat more because he needed to gain strength. Ileana was very surprised when he asked her for forgiveness. Freddie said that he ran away after such an incredible encounter, only because he was very ashamed of stealing the bread. He pointed out that if he had been more careful with his luggage, the cup would not have been stolen from him. And everything that happened only because of his mediocrity. Saying that everything was fine, Ileana put her hand on his shoulder and told him that everything happened only because they were in a desperate situation. With a smile on her face, the girl reminded him that he was still the same great wizard to her. From these words, the young man's face turned red, and tears began to appear in his bright eyes. Trying to change the subject, Ileana said that they would soon bring dessert and asked Freddie if he wanted it. To which he agreed. Seeing how the heroine managed to solve the whole situation, Richard smiled. Already at the fortress, Ileana, giving meat to the dogs, told them not to make fun because they still had some meat left. Seeing how fast the dogs were eating, she assumed they must be very hungry. Richard said that when he checked them, they were all in good shape, and most likely he could subdue them without any problem. He answered affirmatively to the heroine's question about whether he would leave tomorrow. After that, the heroine asked him when he would return. He said that he usually leaves for a week or more, as they constantly move around looking for traces of monsters. And when they find them, they destroy the entire pack. Hearing this, Ileana noticed that this job seemed very dangerous and difficult to her. While preparing to leave, Richard recounted, as an example, the group of listed monsters flying towards the village. He said that usually hungry monsters are very hostile towards every person they see. Richard's family was asked to protect people from them. Ileana also noticed that she sees how some people catch northern monsters to buy them and sell them illegally, with which Richard agreed with her. Recalling the monster from the auction, she thought that it seemed to be suffering unbearable pain. Richard explained that although people know the danger of monsters, they still use them for their personal purposes. And that is why it is difficult for people and monsters to exist together. Then Ileana said that seeing how Q protects her and enjoys the small gifts, she realized that they also have feelings and that they cannot understand each other. Does not mean that people can use monsters for entertainment. Agreeing with her, Richard said that he was very happy with the same opinion. To which Ileana explained that it was all due to her training as a wife. Hearing these words, a smile appeared on Richard's face. Resting his hand against Gritty, Richard asked her if she would mind if he came to see her. Imitating Richard, Bella asked if Ileana would mind seeing her today. The girl was still surprised that Richard really said that. She said she wanted to ask why, but at that moment, a knight came to look for him. Ileana was very surprised when Bella suggested that Richard wanted to have a ceremony with her before leaving. The girl explained to her that the tradition is that someone going on an expedition should be given a gift as a symbol of hope that they will return. After saying that friends also do this, but married people should do it, Ileana asked what kind of gift it should be. Bella told her that normally these are things you can carry with you, but you can give any gift. For example, a butt. The sudden shout was very, very loud and interrupted the girls' conversation. Freddie shouted loudly about the monster and asked Adam to take care of it, which made the girls turn around. In front of them were Q and the frightened Adam and Freddie sitting next to them. Not understanding what was happening, Ileana saw Bella approaching them and noticed that they appeared quite noisily. Getting straight to the point, she said that although Q is a monster, he still works with them. After asking him not to do anything stupid, she said that Richard would not leave them alone if they used strange magic or cast a spell on him. Adam looked at the girl with a not particularly pleased look and said that they had misunderstood him. When he started talking about his achievements and that there was no way he could make a mistake twice, Bella simply turned around and said that she didn't care at all and that no one asked her. Bella turned around and added that she was the youngest wizard working for the head. The fact that she said this in case he walked around and boasted everywhere like before angered Adam. Ileana ran up and greeted Q with a cheerful smile. After petting him, she explained to the uncomprehending Bella that she had recently given him that name. Pointing at the departing wizard, Bella explained to Q that the man who had recently boasted was Adam. Turning around, she said that Adam's student, Freddie, was standing there. Approaching him, Q looked at the young man with interest, and Bella, who was behind, said that since he and Adam would be here for some time, Richard said to introduce them in advance. Anticipation. When Q nudged his nose into Freddie's shoulder, the young man was thrown back a couple of steps even with such force. Shaking his head, the monster realized that Freddie was also quite weak, and that it was useless. Opening his eyes, he saw the young man looking at him with admiration, as it was the first time he had seen the monster so closely. Freddie looked at Q and said that his slender body and shiny tail were not at all what he had read in books. The monster was very happy with such compliments and put its tail over his shoulders. And when the girls behind noticed this, they realized that he was very fond of Freddie. Suddenly, Ileana remembered the gift and began to think about what to give Richard. Already at night, Ileana kept thinking about what Bella told her, that it didn't matter what the gift would be. Knowing that the director was a very good person, she understood that he would probably be satisfied with any gift she gave him. Hearing a knock on the door, Ileana got up from bed. Opening the door, Richard entered the girls' room with a serious face. With a trembling voice and showing nervousness, Ileana noticed that he had arrived. Seeing that Ileana was ready to go to bed, Richard thought he seemed to have arrived quite late. He said he wanted to see her before she went to bed, but apparently this didn't work out. To which the girl replied that she had simply changed clothes in advance. In silence, Ileana carefully closed the door to her room. Suddenly, Ileana turned around, and Richard looked at each other at the same time. Ileana was very surprised when the boy told her to speak first. Richard was willing to listen attentively to what the girl had to say. Thinking about what she needed to tell him about the ceremonial tradition, Ileana tried, and could only utter a couple of sounds. Suddenly, she pointed to the chair and shouted that they definitely needed another chair. Richard watched bewilderedly as Ileana tried to explain her request. Having agreed, he said he would bring a chair here, as there were many in the fortress. And the confused Ileana thanked him. Ileana tried to make sure that, since they were technically not a married couple, the boss's visit might not be related to the ceremonial tradition. Looking at Richard, she thought that if that were the case, he might feel overwhelmed accepting the gift. Richard turned to the girl and suddenly began to tell her that if she had any requests or problems, she should not be afraid to turn to Olivia or the elders. Ileana surprisingly heard that although he knows how independent she is, she probably has many things she would like. Richard believed that if he didn't say this, the girl's stress could start building up. And that's why he wanted to know her. Ileana was very confused and surprised when he said that she was part of his family. And he emphasized it as a fact. With a smile on his face, the boy asked her to trust his family and rely on them. Seeing that the girl lowered her face, he called her. Not letting her face, red with embarrassment, show, the girl nodded and said she would do that. At the same time, screams were heard throughout Ileana's family fortress that someone was invading them, and they needed to adequately protect the lord. The thin knife quickly fell to the ground with a loud metallic sound. Fantastic! Joseph picked it up and informed his attacker that he had heard it was the first time he had visited the fortress in 8 years. With a smile, the man said he couldn't believe he would be killed by such a fine knife. Anger began to appear on the boy's face when Joseph started recalling how Adam praised him for being a very smart child. Addressing Tyler, he spoke of how pathetic he looked when acting on his emotions. Approaching, Joseph began to say that he should be aware of what he had done, because it would be considered a great sin. Tyler's face filled with even more anger when the man demanded an excuse. His angry words that Joseph was a disgusting traitor surprised the man. Tyler believed that becoming the fortress guardian blinded him to his own desires. And it was for this reason that he killed Robert and his grandfather. Laughing, Joseph recalled that the boy's family and he himself received attention from several geniuses and, therefore, they might be wrong. Adjusting his glasses, he said that in memory of his parents, he would act as if this had never happened. Joseph said that the truth is that Robert committed suicide. After saying that Ileana was his grandfather's murderer, the boy's face showed a mix of surprise and disbelief. Not believing him, Tyler exclaimed not to make him laugh, because he was also in the land of wisdom. And he knew that his grandfather died after being stabbed, and his body was never found, while Ileana could not carry a knife. With a smiling face, Joseph tried to convince him that Ileana was not the kind girl he once knew. Tyler did not want to believe his words that Ileana hated her uncle, since he took his brother's place, who committed suicide, and since Alfred was under his protection, she also hated him so much that she decided to kill him. He tried to prove that he was Tyler's only master, because Ileana chose another family. And he was left completely alone. Joseph reached out and said that if Tyler became the king's prime minister, then he should return to the land of wisdom to continue his studies. The boy carefully brought his slightly parted lips to his hand, pretending he was going to kiss it. Suddenly, Joseph screamed from the terrible pain in his arm from the bite. Looking at the man trembling with pain, Tyler said that all the words coming from his mouth were lies, because Ileana had no reason to do so. With a smile on his face, Tyler confidently spoke the words for the man to simply move away from him. Joseph became very angry after these words and noticed how cheeky he was. The man furiously kicked the tied man, and he fell to the ground. Joseph told him not to think he could escape just because he was alive and ordered the knights to imprison Tyler. Hearing Freddy's scream heard throughout the fortress, Adam yelled at him for causing chaos in the morning. But he himself also shouted about what he saw. Neither of them understood what kind of red pile was in the middle of the corridor. Adam asked to have it removed as quickly as possible because it looked so unpleasant that he couldn't pass it. Looking at the pile of meat, Freddy got scared and wondered if he had made a mistake. At that moment, Q was sleeping and was very happy to have helped Freddy become stronger. Realizing this, William noticed that the guests were in a good mood very early in the morning. Charles approached him and told him that he was ready, and his brother suggested that he too should go out cheerfully. Suddenly, Olivia shouted and asked the boys to wait a moment. Noticing that she ran up here, Olivia just asked them to stay here for a while. After a little investigation, she handed them 2 brooches, the color of which matched the color of their hair. When the brothers took them in their hands, she explained to them that she had seen many knights carrying mementos with them, so she thought it would be a shame if they didn't have one. The brothers noticed that they were of much better quality than last year and very beautiful, to which the embarrassed girl said that they were just lying around her house. Charles and William were very surprised when Olivia began to worry about them and asked them to only follow the leader and not fool around. Knowing how dangerous it was there, the embarrassed girl told them to try not to hurt themselves and return home safe and sound. With a bright smile, the brothers thanked us and asking us not to worry. They said that this time, they would definitely return safe and sound. Their surprise turned into a smile, and she nodded, indicating that she would not worry about them so much. The boys were very surprised and bewildered, but they had to agree when she told them not to forget that this year they could not die because of the monster, because she herself would kill them. A bright light illuminated the garden, with many different flowers, where Ileana, sitting at a table, was having a cup of tea. Noticing such a pleasant atmosphere around her, Ileana thought about how long it had been since there was such peace. Suddenly, a voice called the girl by her name. Looking up, she could not understand who was in front of her. Trying to say something, Ileana realized that she couldn't say anything at all. Looking at the man in front of her, she realized that she was experiencing a familiar feeling. Seeing all his composure and beauty, a smile appeared on her face. She realized that the unknown guy sitting in front of her was the boss. A smile appeared on her face, and a bright pink blush became visible on her cheeks. Slightly opening her eyes, she said Richard's name. Realizing it was a dream, she thought she must have gone crazy because she was dreaming of the head. Wrapped in a blanket, she didn't understand how this could happen, as he would only be away for just over a week. Recalling the capture, she abruptly jumped out of bed because she needed to meet him. But she fell asleep. At that moment in the fortress courtyard, Richard looked again at the brothers who had called him. One of the brothers, pointing to the brooch, asked him to guess what it was, and the other cheerfully said it was a gift. They said Olivia gave it to them, wishing them a safe return. The brothers were very happy that their sister gave them a gift this year. Because last year, they couldn't say anything about gifts for fear of someone getting jealous. But now they will boast about them as much as they want. With bright smiles on their faces, they asked him if he had received anything from his lover this year. But Richard simply ignored their question. Realizing that Richard hadn't received anything, Charles and William were very surprised. But the boy explained to them that he hadn't told them about this ceremony. Richard asked them to stop when the boys started shouting indignantly about why he wasn't doing this. Because they belonged to each other. With a serious face, he told them to take their positions as they had to leave soon. Addressing their places, one of the brothers asked the other what they should do with the head. To which the latter suggested telling all the elders. Looking up at the sky, Richard thought about how he couldn't get a child who was just starting to adapt to this place to participate in his family's culture. He did not want to burden Ileana with such petty tasks that are a wife's duties. Because their official marriage was, in fact, registered just for show. Recalling that the girl never dared to tell him anything yesterday afternoon, he became angry. Ileana, sparing no effort, ran towards the place, trying to arrive before Richard left the castle. Seeing Olivia in the crowd, she loudly called her and asked what was happening with the capture. Approaching her, the girl told her that they would be leaving soon. Turning around, Ileana saw Richard commanding the entire formation. Ordering them to raise their weapons, he explained that they would soon head to the center of the monster territory. So they couldn't get nervous for even a second. Turning to Bella, who was next to him, he asked how things were going with the magic. To which she replied that everything was perfect, and as soon as he gave the signal, she would immediately send them there without delay. All the soldiers in the ranks were as one with serious and stern faces. Noticing this, Ileana realized that the atmosphere was quite tense. She had never captured a monster, but seeing how nervous they were made her realize that capturing one was very dangerous. Recalling the auction moment, she thought that much larger and stronger monsters than that could be waiting for them. But despite this, they would still have to leave. Looking at Richard, she understood that everyone else was also sending them on their way, wishing them a safe return. Seeing how busy she was, Ileana realized that the director's words that there would be no time to talk today turned out to be true. Ileana truly regretted not being able to say a proper goodbye and give him a gift. And now it was probably too late. Bella, explaining to Richard, noticed that he wasn't listening to her at all and was looking in another direction. Seeing Richard suddenly jump up from his seat and head somewhere, she asked where he was going. Looking at him, Ileana felt as if the head was heading towards her. Passing through the entire line, Richard walked straight towards her with a stern face. Approaching Ileana, he began to tell her that she was not indifferent to him at all, and that he didn't care at all that she seemed to want to talk to him. Ileana was surprised after his words, and that he cared how sad she looked. With a serious face, she asked him if he could tell her what was on his mind. Realizing he had pressured her, Richard apologized for it. As he was about to leave, he told her to pretend nothing was happening, but Ileana asked him to stop. Removing the ribbon from her hair, Ileana understood that she didn't care at all about being a real marriage. And she really wanted to see how he would react to such gifts. Gifts. While waiting for his return, she really wanted to show the leader her thoughts and, extending her ribbon into his palms, she said she would be very angry if he got hurt. Richard looked surprised as she asked to return safe and sound with this gift. With her face brightly red from embarrassment, she said she wanted to say it earlier. But she overthought it, and it was already too late. Richard took the ribbon from her hands and carefully tied it around her hair. Placing his fist on his chest, he promised to return unharmed and destroy all the darkness of the north. In return, he asked her to be safe and sound and gently grabbed her wrist. Richard tied a ribbon there and said it would be a gift from him. When Ileana noticed that he had previously tied her hair, the boy revealed it was a gift from Robert. She was very surprised by this gift, and Richard said he thought this ribbon would suit her much better. With a smile on his face, he was sure that Robert would definitely protect her. The embarrassed girl looked at him with bright eyes and returned the smile gratefully. Ileana watched as the entire formation, along with Richard and Bella, disappeared with the help of magic. She was very surprised when Olivia, pulling her closer to her, asked if she felt much closer to the head. The heroine looked down embarrassed as the girl started asking her how she was, and if their love was growing stronger. Their conversation about Ileana bringing her gift quite late was interrupted by a strong wind. Worried about the girl, Olivia asked if she was all right. Ileana agreed and decided to look around, and Olivia didn't understand why the wind was blowing so hard now. Looking north, the heroine saw how bad the weather was in that direction. A week has passed since Richard led the knights in the conquest. Ileana received an anonymous telegram from her family's fortress. The heroine's face filled with horror when she read that Tyler would soon be executed. Running down the corridor, Ileana didn't understand at all why she was in the fortress. As until that moment, she was sure she was in the land of wisdom training. She suggested that he might be protesting against his uncle for the murder of Elder Alfred. The heroine thought it was her fault, as she couldn't protect Elder Alfred. As she kept running, she suddenly bumped into someone's shoulder and fell. Sitting on the floor, Ileana looked up and saw Olivia, who asked if she was all right. Extending her hand, the girl asked where she was in such a hurry, as she didn't even see anything on the way. Seeing that Ileana somehow looked unwell, Olivia asked if something had happened to her. The heroine was very surprised when she invited her to tell her problem, and she would try to help her. Wanting to tell everything, thoughts of not being able to tell her came to Ileana's mind. Because everyone might find out about Elder Alfred. Getting up, the heroine said nothing had happened, and that she just needed to tell Adam something. And Freddie. Ileana lied by saying she was very interested in how they were, and wanted to tell them many things. That's why she was in a hurry. Hiding the letter behind her back, she said with a smile that they were probably already waiting for her. And that's why she would go first. While taking care of her, Olivia thought about how suspicious this situation was. As the heroine walked towards the desired room, many different thoughts went through her head. She knew that 3 years ago, when her parents died, according to a survivor, Elder Alfred's relatives tried to save her parents. But in the end, they couldn't return either. And recently, the elder himself died trying to protect her. Understanding that 3 family members had already died trying to protect her family. There was no way she could let Tyler die too. She knew that people here would definitely help her if she asked, but this was only her family's problem. And she didn't want to bring even more trouble to everyone. With thoughts of solving this problem on her own, she entered the room, where she was immediately greeted by Adam, surprised by her arrival. Looking at the books, the heroine didn't even know where to start telling them about this problem. Turning around, she finally saw Freddie and thanked Adam for bringing him. Confused, Freddie asked why she was looking for them. After talking about the suddenness of this decision, Ileana talked about the plan to go today with them to her family's fortress. Hearing this, Freddie and Adam were shocked by this decision. Having interrupted Adam, the heroine was sure that this seemed strange to them, because she wanted to return there when she first escaped. Extending the letter, she asked them to read this anonymous telegram they had sent her from the fortress. Adam took the letter in his hands and, after reading it, was very surprised. With a depressed expression on his face, he suggested that Tyler had been caught trying to fight Joseph and, if everything was as in the telegram, he would be executed tomorrow morning. When asked if the leader knew about this, Ileana said that she did not plan to tell the people of this entire fortress and, if anyone found out, she would be at a disadvantage. Having tried to convince her lover, Freddie only heard in response that she did not believe it was dangerous, because they knew more about this fortress than anyone. After she explained to him that they had to invade the fortress today and rescue Tyler before he was sent for execution, Adam became thoughtful. Addressing Adam and Freddie, the heroine said that they and other people associated with her family are very important to her, and that she has already let too many people go. Pressing her hands against her chest, Ileana said confidently that she did not want to lose any more people from her circle. Bowing down, Adam expressed all his understanding, and as wizards of her family, they will do what she says. Addressing Freddie, she asked him to confirm her words, and the frightened guy agreed with him. Handing him the letter, Adam said he would make the preparations and offered to meet again in the evening, to which Ileana thanked him. As she was about to leave, the heroine thought that if there had been a leader here, he would not have allowed it, and by going with them, Ileana would again have to rely on his strength. Thinking that perhaps it was good that Richard was not around, the girl opened the door and said they would see each other later. Looking at Adam and Freddie, she realized that she now had her family's wizards. At that moment, in the fortress, one of his soldiers approached Joseph and asked him to have his teacher check something. When he asked what happened, the soldier told him something very important. Hearing his words, a smile appeared on Richard's face. Tomorrow, Crown Prince Robert comes of age and will have to take the place of the fortress head in the Land of Winds.